I feel like I like Le Guin more as an essayist than a novelist.
How desirable is a world without hierarchy?
There were some deep flaws with the world building of the book that I was taken out of.
I'm sorry, but like the world building in Red Rising is like total bullshit from this perspective too, right?
Yeah.
Look, I'm in your book club, okay? We had a 4-hour discussion about this book. It literally provoked thought.
We also had a 4-hour discussion about Wind and Truth. It provoked a lot of angry thoughts. Welcome back, everybody, to another Tutor Ramble episode. I'm one of your hosts, Austin.
I'm your other host, Richard.
And we also have...
Jared.
Yeah,
Jared
good job,
Henderson.
Jared. You got your line. We have Jared Henderson from Jared Henderson's channel, Philosophy Book Channel. Everybody, go check it out. He's collabed with us before, and we actually discussed what we're going to discuss with you all today, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, which, Jared, this is your favorite sci-fi book of all time?
Yeah. If not, it's like really, really close. But I would at least say it is a book very, very dear to my heart. I've read it many times. I will read it many more times. I love it.
We're really happy to have you on because we didn't like this book. Your favorite book is one of our worst books.
No, not worst book. No.
I'm trying to get the tension.
No, it's...
But because we did not like it, we did not appreciate it, we're very happy to have you on, especially for the audience, to show the positives, and we can hash this out, see where maybe we're mistaken. We'll find out where the truth lies.
This is going to be spoiler-free as usual. Sorry, Jared.
Well, for one, I know where the truth lies, and two, I think what the audience needs to know that I bought you guys this book.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
That is true.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't like it.
Ugh. Feels filthy.
It's very filthy. But yes, we're going to go spoiler-free for a little bit here to see if you all at home want to pick up this book, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Then we'll get into spoilers in like 10 minutes. We will pitch it to you, and Jared will more so pitch it to you. And I think, Jared, you do a better job at the context around this book. It was written, 1974. Le Guin's series, is it the Hainish Cycle? But it's book 6 of a series that you can read completely out of order.
Yeah, the Hainish Cycle is really something that was kind of created after the fact. And it refers to the fact that Le Guin uses some common technologies and some common settings in sort of around her worlds. However, it's not really written with the idea that you have to read them in order. And in fact, there are fairly significant inconsistencies across the books when it comes to the world building. So you kind of actually have to approach each of the Hainish Cycle books as its own thing. Le Guin wrote about this, that in some of the books, for instance, Terrans, who are Earthlings or humans like us, have some kind of telepathic powers. They're highly empathetic and they can sense the emotions of others. That just doesn't appear in other books. And commenting on that, she basically just said, in some books I wrote it that way, and in some books I didn't. The one thing that ties them all together, though, is that they have this idea that there were the Hains, the Hainish people, who are sort of the progenitors of all human-like creatures in the galaxy. And in fact, what they did is populate various planets with essentially their genetic experiments. This is most famously done in The Left Hand of Darkness, because it's a world without sexual differentiation. And that's a genetic experiment by the Hains. But then the Hains just leave. They kind of drop these experiments down, and then they leave. And what's happening in most of these books is that the Hains have been reaching out to other civilizations, like on Terra, and they are forming a kind of galactic confederation. It's like a galactic brotherhood. They call it the Ecumen. And so a lot of the books center around, or at least will heavily feature, this kind of galactic politics, at least going on in the background, even though that's never really the main point of the plot.
Got it. And The Lathe of Heaven is the only other Ursula K. Le Guin book. We read her essay, an essay of hers as well, which was lovely. We read The Lathe of Heaven. Is that a part of the Hainish Cycle as well?
I don't believe it's a part of the Hainish Cycle.
Okay.
The books that you would want to read for the Hainish Cycle certainly are The Dispossessed, The Left Hand of Darkness, and Rokanan's World. There are other books that do fit into it. Library of America publishes it as a 2-volume series or set. And off the top of my head, I'm kind of blanking, so we'd have to look those up. But the Lathe of Heaven really just kind of takes place on Earth. Although, as you know, it takes place on an Earth that's overcrowded. It's being wrecked by environmental disaster, which is also true of Terra in the Heinous Cycle. When Terra is mentioned, it's often mentioned that they destroy their planet through ecological disaster.
Right. So yeah, so that is the context around this series. The Dispossessed in particular, to anybody who has not read this book yet, how would you pitch this book to them? And you'd obviously highly recommend it. Why would you highly recommend it to them?
So the initial pitch is that this is Ursula K. Le Guin's attempt to write a utopian novel about nonviolent anarchism. And if that sounds like even an interesting idea at all to you, then you should give it a shot. She does this, however, by writing the story of Shevek, who is a scientist on the planet Anaris, which is sort of, as people sometimes refer to it jokingly, at the Anarchy planet. And he is actually traveling to a statist planet, a planet that's made up of nations that have proper states and hierarchy, called Eurus. And they are kind of twin planets. In fact, Anaris could be seen as a moon of Eurus. Shevek is a scientist and a bit of a philosopher. And in fact, Le Guin models Shevek after Oppenheimer. She met Oppenheimer when she was a child because her father was associated with the University of California at Berkeley. Her father was a famous anthropologist, actually. And she had met Oppenheimer, and she kind of used Oppenheimer as the basis for Shevek. That's another reason to use, you might want to read it, because he's just like an interesting science fiction take on Oppenheimer's story, which people find, at least a little bit interesting, enough for Christopher Nolan to make a movie about it. But if I was telling people like why I think it's worth exploring or worth coming to again and again, it really isn't the anarchy. It really isn't. I think it's the deep character work. I think it's the philosophical reflections about being true to your own ideals, about the role of an individual in society, about the obligations that we have to others, but also the obligations that we have to ourselves and how much we have to compromise on those obligations we have towards ourselves when we're dealing with other people. Those are the themes that always trouble me the most and always intrigue me the most whenever I return to this book. And honestly, I find that the people who like this the most, they often probably first get taken in by the anarchism. That was certainly it for me. But as they read it more and more, the details of the anarchism become less interesting. And it's those deeper themes and it's the character work that keeps them coming back. On top of that, Le Guin is a great prose stylist. She just has a way with words. Her diction, I think it's incredible. And she has a way of writing in what can almost seem like a very plain way. It's not ornate. And it's very rarely complex if you're thinking syntactically. But it's always doing something. It's very intentional. And she's often finding just the right word in a way that I think is quite powerful.
And Rich, how would you, from your perspective, spoiler-free, pitch this to peeps out there?
Pitch or my perspective?
Your perspective, thoughts on the book, and setting expectations properly.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, at least my experience with the book, so I went into this book, reading the back, understanding like, okay, this is anarchism versus, statism. Off the bat, when I was reading this book, I felt that the book was trying to show me the ideals and the drawbacks of anarchism, and not just as a function of a functional system, but as an individual, of how individuals act within the system and the values these people hold. And I'm reading it going, I don't see, like, this seems like a dystopia to me. And then we go to, so I felt a little disconnected there. But going on, it's generally, to me, the plot itself is relatively boring to me. It was hard for me to get through this book. This book slowed down my reading month significantly. But by the end, I did start to connect a little bit more with the personal relationship with Shevek and his partner and the dynamics between the two. And the ultimate question that was more compelling to me was about the the connection of freedom and obligation, of how responsibility is far more impactful or meaningful when it is accompanied, like when it is done through free will rather than obligation or contract. That was the ending question to me that was at least more significant. But overall, I think there were some deep flaws with the world building of the book that I was taken out of. I was not buying into the world. The characters themselves were not particularly interesting for me for most of the plot. And so that was my overall thoughts with it.
See what you really think. Come on. It hurts feelings more. Like, be a little harsher than that. That is I posted a little bit ago.
I'm stunned by this, but my feelings are not hurt.
Okay, very fair. Yeah, we had, this was our book club pick for the month of July, and Jared's the one who pitched it to the book club, and it was selected, and several people in the book club loved it. I want to shout out Ocean and Levy were big advocates along with you. This was several people's favorites. Then we had our negative side from Mr. Blask and Deriving, who called it Turbo Ass, which I think is going to be a new saying, along with my new shirt saying. I have a new shirt. It's going to be
a new Tune Ramble shirt coming soon.
It's going to be Anarchy is Cringe. Okay, because I was going into this book. Yeah.
Well, no, it's democracy is cringe. Anarchy is cringy.
Yeah, I will say, to set people's expectations, which Jared already did a great job for the positive side, and look at him shaking his head. So for setting expectations, going into this book, the thought-provokingness and the themes are very heavy here, and I think it is as described. It's not a book that I think you can go to necessarily escape in. It's very much connecting to real world. It's talking about anarchy. It's creating this ambiguous utopia. I don't think we mentioned that the subtitle of the book, it's The Dispossessed, an ambiguous utopia. And so it's presenting this anarchist planet, and then this planet where there are several states. So you have capitalism, you have basically the Soviet Union representation, as well as what would you call
it's communism.
Yes. And then you have several states on this other planet.
a kind of statist communism, you would typically say.
And so my feelings when finishing the book was I posted my thoughts on there. Man, there's a lot of Le Guin fans, but I have similar thoughts to you, Rich, where I was very curious reading this because I hadn't ever read a book with anarchism as this utopia, and I wanted to see the function, how this would work. And I think my biggest criticism to this is I think that Le Guin went for a thought experiment over a narrative, and not just in that way. I think she presents flaws, and she makes it she shows positives and negatives to her of these planets and the sides of their philosophies and their political systems. But I think she tries to serve I don't want to call it a manifesto, because it's not a political manifesto she's saying, but I would compare it more to, she's going for this thought experiment over natural storytelling, where I found the world building. She tries to present anarchy with some sort of realistic scenario this would exist, but I think in her attempt to try to make it realistic, she creates more flaws that I was constantly questioning of how would this work? And because she was trying to be fair, she didn't just make this more of a, as Scott said in our book club, a Teletubby land of, if this was more absurdist and human nature was different, I think her thought experiment could work better. But I think she constantly did things that made me go, well, now, like, this isn't just a book. This book is now trying to say something about the real world, and that's where I kept disconnecting. And I think the themes in the book, I wanted to look at anarchy and start to see some sort of something that I hadn't seen before, heard before, or maybe just be convinced by this new style of thinking I hadn't seen before. Because my preconceived notions going into the book is I think anarchy is silly, cringe. We'll use the word cringe even. And this book didn't convince me of any sort of ideal that was worthy to strive for. And
not that it doesn't have flaws, or because there's a difference between the practice and the ideal of any system, but that the ideal that striving for was not even worth it.
Yeah, because I also did read it. It was very dystopian to me too, and I was confused, going like, wait, am I supposed to be reading this like it's dystopian, or is it there's supposed to be positives here? We're gonna get it all the ways. We're still in spoiler free, so we got to stop beating around the bush. And I will say this: so to anybody that's listened to this at this point, obviously it's heavy on the themes and thought provokingness, and Jared here connected deeply with the characters as well. So the character journey. So people that will go into this, I guess if you think you would be, Rich and I's taste here. So if you think you would be more in the camp of does the anarchist thought experiment interest you? Then, like Jared said, hey, go in with that kind of mindset and to set your expectations. So maybe you don't come in as flawed as Rich and I thought it was. Maybe go in with you focused, Jared. You said the anarchy wasn't as important to you, right? So it seems like we're talking about that all the time. To you, the more important thing was Shevek and his emotional journey, right?
It's Shevek and his emotional journey, his kind of reconciling with his ideals and reality, understanding that it's often hard to live up to your exact ideals. And, I admit I'm someone who has probably a very strong kind of individualist leanings in the sense of like, I think it's really important for, in particular, individuals to adhere to their own conscience, to actually do what they think is right rather than kind of deferring their morality to a group that just tells them what to do. And I find in Shevek someone who's actually wrestling with that, but still trying to figure out, how do I not go out just going and being a selfish asshole, basically? Like, how do I remain true to myself while also being part of, to use kind of the Odonian phrase that you would find in the book, the social organism? And that's a sort of philosophical, political, personal problem that I personally wrestle with quite a bit. And so this book, I think, is just the best book I know of that really kind of explores that tension.
I think that people are just going to be curious to know, like, so Jared, it's one of his favorites, and then we don't like it. I think out of that, people are just going to be curious to read the book. Honestly, I think the difference there makes it more interesting. If just you and I were here saying don't like the book, I bet you more people will read it now going, I want to know whose side I'm on.
Well, I really appreciate you, Jared, coming on for this one. It'll definitely make for a better discussion and better video.
Well, what's your rating, Rich? What'd you give it out of 5 stars?
Well, overall, I gave The Dispossessed a 2 out of 5 stars. With the rest of the categories listed here for you, Nick, you can display them there.
My brother in arms, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Flawed, and here is my total category breakdown. And we were only able to brush on this. I do want to say is I'm trying to be open to, a lot of people will love this book. It won the Hugo, the Locust, and Nebula. It was a triple crown there.
Yeah, just because it is a 2 to us doesn't mean it's a 2 to you.
But
But that's how we felt.
As we do get into the meat of this, I did have serious problems with this book. And I'm going to be getting like, I can't wait to get this out again. We had a 4-hour discussion, and then Rich and I had other 4-hour discussions, and Jared's going to be sick of us. Okay, Jared, I don't know if you want to give a rating or anything. We can move on if you don't want to put numbers to things, and you want to avoid the hierarchies of existing reality. You just want to live it free.
It's a 5. It's a 5 out of 5.
Yes.
It's a 5-star book.
Yeah.
It's I didn't think about how to break it down for all of the parts for the Rambler rating. I could send that to you later if you want to put it on the screen. Mr. Editor. You'll have it there. I wouldn't give every dimension of this book 5, but overall, I think it's a 5-star book.
Fair. Yeah, as with most 5 stars. Yeah. That's definitely the case. Okay. And I will say the best category, the prose was very delightful. Prose was really great. And that was, this, again, not being our first Le Guin book too, I liked Lathe of Heaven.
Yeah.
That was a good book. And her essay we read was awesome. The Why Do Americans Fear Dragons? We have to read Language of the Night. I think we would like that more because I feel like I like Le Guin more as an essayist than a novelist. Oh, that's a tagline. Okay. Are we ready? Spoiler warning for everybody. Spoilers going right now, here on out. Go read The Dispossessed if you want. All right. Emotional impact. What'd you give out of 5 stars, Rich?
Emotional impact, I gave it a 2.25.
Very disappointed?
Very disappointed. But I wouldn't go as far as saying flawed.
I gave this one a 3-star. I was neutral. I was emotionally neutral on this. I this was not my gripe with the book at all. I was curious and interested. And you don't have to give a rating, Jared, but emotionally, this is the one that.
No, I'll give you ratings for all these, man.
A 5.
It's a when it comes to emotional impact, it's 5. It's 5 stars.
Yeah.
The first time I read this book, I called my would-be wife, we were just dating at the time, drunk because I went to a party that night afterward, and I was like almost in tears about how much I loved this book, like telling her she had to read it. And this book hits me deep every time I read it.
What was that moment for you, that tear-jerking moment?
Well, it's 2 major parts of it. One of the things is that especially as you read it here, and I want to know if this came through for you, just how intensely lonely Shevek feels. And as someone who has like really felt that intense loneliness in my life before, I find it incredibly relatable. And so then, as the story progresses, and Shevek becomes more and more alienated from those around him, and alienated from himself, and like that's the worst kind of loneliness. Like I'm even alone when I'm just by myself because like I don't understand. I don't even have a kind of kinship with myself. But he seems to he kind of comes home to himself, and then he's going to return to Anaris, and he's going to return to Takfur and their children, and that moment. Where he doesn't know what home is going to be like because you can never return to the same place. But he's willing to go because he's going to go back and he's going to be under the stars with Takfur and his children. That always gets me.
Did that get you? Well, it didn't get you, but did you see the emotional pull? You could see that in the book.
I could see the pull.
Yeah.
I personally, the Shevek being lonely was not an emotional pull for me. Maybe it's because I was disconnected because of the world and the plot that I wasn't as connected to his like character journey. Because I of course see it, but it didn't connect with me in this story. The reason why I'm giving it such a low emotional impact score is because it took me so long to read this book. Of every opportunity I had to read this book, I would want to pick something else. I never really had a great desire to continue reading after any chapter. And so that's kind of why I have to give it a low emotional score.
Gotcha.
Because nothing was really drawing me in.
Yeah, so I'm a little in between on that of the. So here's kind of how I went into the book too, and this probably affected it a bit. When reading this, this is a kind of book that I think typically Richard, you and I could really like because those deep themes. We kind of like to nerd out over that and have long discussions on it. And as soon as reading the book, I felt I was zoned in on the thematic elements. I was zoned in on, okay, she has a lot to say. Early on, you see Shevek even talking about Zeno's paradox in that one scene of, if throwing something at a tree, or I can't remember if it was at a tree or something, whatever, of, hey, can you, as you're throwing something at that tree, how does it ever reach there if you just keep on? If to get to the tree, you have to keep having that distance. So what's half from here to the tree? It's in between me and the tree. Then what's half of the middle? And then what's half of that, half of that, half of that? How do you ever get to the tree? Like that whole Zeno's paradox thing. So immediately, as soon as the book's going, I'm going, okay, all the dialogue, all the conversations, all of this, I'm here to learn. This felt like I was a student ready to learn something. So I was, as far why I'm kind of neutral on this, I was intrigued and seeing the backstory of Shevek and some of the cool scenes where they learn what prisons are. And there's that scene where they put one of their friends or classmates in this makeshift prison, and it's just their society was neat and weird. And so I was kind of curious where is this going? Even the presentation of there being this moon planet with that lives in this different type of society. I was in as far as, okay, make this make sense, and I was curious and all of that. So there was just constant curiosity. Obviously, we'll get to the themes and stuff, why it didn't land for me. So I had that going for me, but I could see for you, Jared, why the factors that made us not emotionally invested was maybe your brain was doing the same thing too, Rich, of just constantly thinking, okay, this is supposed to be thoughtful, and I'm locked into that. I'm locked into the message and what's this trying to say.
Sure, and there's also many emotional beats and moments in the story that is supposed to be, it's a revelation to Shevek, and I was always wondering, is it supposed to be a revelation to the reader? And it was very much not for me.
Can you give an example of that, Rich?
Yes. I think one of the clearer examples was when Shevek is with his friend who's more anarchist than him. He's, telling Shevek about the PVC, of how it is itself a type of hierarchy, and they have a government of sorts, and that they don't have laws, but they have societal pressure, and that, basically giving Shevek one of his big revelation moments. Who decides, you want to get something published, and yet somebody else gets to decide no. And that we have these people who are, they don't have a law against us. They can't tell you no in that sense, but no one ever no one ever breaks, or not enough people break the social protocol. We have social shaming that accomplishes the same goal. Like the PVC is a government. And to that's a big revelation moment. And to me, like from page 1, like when they bring up rationing, and I'm going like, well, who decided that? Who decided how much one ration is worth? Like, so I'm constantly going like, yeah, of course there's a hierarchy here. Like I'm looking at this every time something comes up, I'm already there.
But
and so the emotional moment for Shevek is like, I was not as connected to that moment.
So 2 points here, Rich. But let me try to make the more important one here. So it's actually very understandable that would not be a moment of revelation for you. It shouldn't be a moment of revelation for you because you're used to a world of hierarchy and order, right? Just like we all are. Shevek has to come to that realization because he is sort of, well, he's fully in the world of Inaris. And that's actually, I think, one of the powerful parts about this book. One way of thinking about this, okay, this is a bit weird, is that it's sort of the inverse of the farm boy who becomes the fantasy hero. Because what's the value of what's the value of a farm boy who becomes the fantasy hero? It's that he has roughly the same amount of knowledge about this world that we're coming into as the reader. And so we get to learn about the world through him, right? When Rand leaves the village, sorry, I know you guys don't like Wheel of Time, or at least one of you doesn't like Wheel of Time examples, but when Rand leaves the village, when he leaves Emond's Field, and the Two Rivers, he learns about this wider world as the reader learns about them. And it's a very convenient thing. Shevek, however, he has no knowledge of this hierarchical world that he's going to, the world of Eurus, but Eurus looks a lot like our world. And so what does that mean, like, for the way the story is structured? It's that Le Guin can use Shevek to point out strange things about our world that we take for granted. So his revelations on Inaris might strike us as obvious because we're looking at this world and we can immediately see its flaws. He can't, as someone who's there, in the same way that us living in our society with its particular arrangements and its politics can't necessarily see its flaws because it's kind of the air that we breathe. Shevek is the outsider who points out the strangeness of our social arrangements. And I think that's maybe why it can be weird for the revelations on Inaris, but it, I think, intensifies the emotional impact actually on Eurus.
Well, to follow up to that point, it's a good example of maybe that's being the intention behind it. But to me, the revelations on Urus were also not particularly hitting home of like, I see the flaws. And I'm like, yes, of course. I do think they were exaggerated for the sake of the story. Of course they are. But another thing that, and we'll get into this of maybe world building, but I just want to mention it here, of I am constantly comparing both worlds. And there were examples of things happen on Urus, and specifically like a sexual assault, different types of violence, all of these issues with Urus. And then you compare it back to Inaris. And I am constantly asking the question of why is it individual? Why is it individual one-off acts on Inaris and, larger things on Urus? There's a particular scene that really emotional, like I don't buy. I see what Le Guin is trying to say, and I immediately don't buy it. And it took, especially with Shevek's character. So there's a moment with Shevek sexually assaults this woman in
Vea.
Yep. And basically it's a turning point for him of realizing how Urus has corrupted him and his sense of morality, and that he was treating her like property as in his mind. And it's a turning point for him to like go further, to actually seek out the revolution on Urus and help. To me, I went bullshit. No, No, it's not the reason why. Like, you didn't do that because you were a proprietarian of like, oh, the capitalists, the proprietarians made me do it. I'm like, no. That really irked me.
Well, I don't think it's that the proprietarians make him do it. It's that he's learned to think in a new way, and that new way leads him to be actually worse to his fellow human beings.
So this is something that I thought would have been, Scott mentioned this, I was in a call with him afterwards, that I would have loved if this book did this. If we had a Shevek going to capitalist planet of Urus, and if we had somebody from capitalist planet going to
be accurate,
yeah.
and for Jared's sake,
Yeah.
it's a statist planet, not a capitalist
But
planet.
we spent a lot of time in the capitalist.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
We spend time in the capitalist area, but
Yeah.
it is
So-
a statist planet.
So
if
Shevek goes to the country of AIO,
AIO
and AIO
on the planet of
is
Urus.
AIO is essentially the United States in
Yep.
its structures, right?
Yes.
It's kind of a mid 20th century United States. That's probably the easiest way to think about it. There are non-capitalist countries on Eurus, but we don't see them. We see a representative from one of them. In fact, that representative goes to Shevek and says, "Hey, we're also like you. We are Adonians." And he says no, and he uses a weird word. He says, "No, you're not, because you're Archist," right? We never hear the word Archist because it's strange, but it's just literally taking the prefix "an" off of that, right? So they're anarchists, people without a state. Everyone on Eurus is an Archist, people with a state.
Yeah, I thought it was so I thought it would have been neat if this was Scott's idea of having then somebody from AIO then go to Urus and get that culture shock of seeing how different each culture thinks. And because I think the complaint you have, I agree with, is having it would have been, this kind of gets more into world stuff for me, because I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves of just the suspension of disbelief. But one of the things that would have been interesting to show is, okay, that's more themes. It's just more themes of getting into the assault scene that happens on AIO, and him thinking like a proprietarian leads to that. And then why do we not see that on Anarchy Planet of Anaris? And the assumption that because, and not the assumption, I should say, but it would have been interesting if there was either an assault scene on both rather than on one. And I think this is where you can kind of see where Le Guin herself is an anarchist, or at least anarchist ideals.
She's at least sympathetic. She's at least sympathetic to it.
Sympathetic. So, I kind of want to hold off on themes. I don't want to jump too far ahead, because I have lots of thoughts.
Well,
on that.
what I'm hearing from both of you is that you hate the theme. Well, you hate the world building essentially so much that it undermines the emotional impact. It undermines the themes. It undermines basically everything except the prose. That seems to be the sort of official to Ramble stance. Is that the world building is so bad?
That is not unfair. That is not an unfair statement to say.
Yeah. For me, why I put neutral on this one here is because I wasn't nothing in the book. Like, I was not upset. I was not there was. I was again curious of what's being said here. I was just more emotionally flat, because I went in this book like I would go into literally an essay of. Walking into an essay that's being written and going, okay, I'm not going to cry like as you did, because it's a narrative, obviously, but I'm not going to be emotionally pulled by name something that I can't think of essays.
You're not going to be pulled by what it. I mean,
why do Americans fear dragons? Literally, her other essays she's read, where I'm going like, oh, that's very interesting. So I am reading this like almost emotionally neutral. Of going, okay, sorry. So that's just my stance. If I'm reading this, going, she's trying to say something. It is more of an essay. So that's why I'm kind of neutral on it. I was intrigued to see where she went. All my talking points are more in the other stuff, but you seem to be more of, hey, I really don't like that scene there, because it reminded you of the lack of immersion you had and other sorts of stuff.
Well, it basically made me disconnect from key emotional moments and, the immersion of the world and story being told. That's my experience. And then when it comes to actually wanting to read it, continue on, I am not connected to the world or characters in that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, Jared, for you, because you're mentioning that the relationship with Shevek and Takvar. Am I saying her name right? Because they do have cool names where all of them have 2-syllable names. Is that how they're all similar? Like Bedap,
Yeah,
talk for.
they all have two syllable names, and there's like a database essentially, and you just kind of go to the database and pick one, and that ensures that everyone has a unique name. So there will be another Shevek on the planet if once he dies, the name gets recycled basically.
Except that one bastard Chevet. that
yeah,
little guy.
It's too similar, right? And he hates it. Right? Yeah, there's this guy who hates it that he sounds like Shevek.
Right. But that relationship there. So my reading, why emotional neutral is just, I was reading this more essay. I was intrigued by what it had to say. You were, since you were kind of more on board for the world building and that stuff, you were able to focus on the emotional journey, it seems like. So that moment for you, their relationship being big, maybe were the premise of the book being on this anarchy planet and him traveling it. Let's just talk about structure for a second. Of we get present day, what he's doing, and then past of how did he grow up on this planet. Present day, then past. Present day, past, and it's 13 chapters or so. Each one just switches between these point of views. How did you like that? What was your
the last flashback chapter? Essentially is the moment before the first chapter of the book.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because it's him deciding to leave.
Yep.
And then the first chapter of the book is him leaving the planet.
Yes. Because it's circular in the same way, the simultaneity. It's a simultaneity theory as well. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. The form reflects one of the themes of the book.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, for you, did you like that going present day, past, present day, past?
Yeah, I think it's very well done. I don't typically love flashback scenes too much. I think that they can be a little cheesy. I think baking it into the structure so thoroughly actually makes it less cheesy. And what we really have are two separate narratives in this novel that are thematically and emotionally connected more than they are narratively connected. Because really it could be just one long narrative. But the way that she sort of stacks the scenes on top of each other allows you to find more emotional parallels or thematic parallels between the chapters. Right. And I think she does it. I think she does it quite well.
So what you're saying is she sets it up like one of those TikTok loops where it looks like it's a continuous video. She was inspired by these days.
Yeah, she was kind of the first. She was kind of the first TikTok author. I think you could say that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna quote that for sure. I'm gonna put that on a T-shirt. Sorry, you're gonna say something, Rich?
No, I was just saying like that's a great way to. Yeah, we just got to keep poking the bear.
But yes, because I know. So Jared does have to go after like in 20 minutes or so. Want to go into thought provokingness because emotionally, I don't think we'll have a ton to say on emotion stuff. Okay, thought provokingness. What'd you give it out of 5 stars?
Me?
Yes.
I gave it a 2.25.
Very disappointed by it. Wow. So okay, I gave it a 2 stars. Flawed. This is where I had my issues in the thought provokingness and world. And Jared, I can say for you, it's a 5 out of 5, right? It has to be.
Yeah, it's a 5. Yeah, it's 5 out of 5 for thought provokingness. Yeah. Look, I'm in your book club. Okay, we had a 4-hour discussion about this book. It literally provoked thought.
We also had a 4-hour discussion about Wind and Truth. It provoked a lot of angry thoughts.
Just because length does not equal quality.
It was
anyway,
4 hours of us
complaining. I think it's very good at provoking thoughts. I think it makes you question our own sort of hierarchical system. It makes you actually question the feasibility of anarchism. You know, I have a lot of, I would call it like emotional or sort of philosophical sympathies for anarchism, but don't ultimately think that the kind of society that Anaris is trying to build is ultimately desirable. Like I don't believe that. And I had to really work through why or why not. What are the things I love about it versus the things that I don't? And that's inspired basically years of thought on my part. And I think even for you guys, thinking about how much you dislike Anaris probably means it's actually pretty thought-provoking. But you know, it's your scores. I understand. You know, you shouldn't question another man's score or whatever like that. So I get it.
Apparently,
that's
Wind
like you don't ask
Truth
him
is our
his
new
salary,
favorite book
right?
Because we really like talking about Wind and Truth of how much we didn't like it. But no, I see what you mean, and that's why I'm not going lower than 2 because it's a quality book in that she presents the themes and she's very intelligent in how she handles them. It's that the premises she sets up, and so the lessons to take away from it that I feel she's trying to say, that I should say the book is trying to say, that the book's trying to say, I don't agree with, and also the the flaws in the logic to get there. So there's a couple. There's so many themes here to talk about. There's the freedom. It's honestly the freedom and the individuality. There's the mutual aid versus social Darwinism. There is we can talk about the simultaneity theory. That there's a lot of directions we can go. And sorry, Rich, were you about to say something? Jump in or?
No, go.
Yep. Yeah. No, so there's a lot to talk about. I think the critical thing here is, okay, we heard in the book club, and there's different readings of this, is what is the book trying to say first with these political systems? Is it saying that there's a balance and take both? Is it just saying, hey, the revolution is always constant and happening because on Anaris, we left Urus and we got comfortable. Now there's this bureaucracy with the PDC. We have to keep the revolution's constantly happening. There's all of that thematically entwined. Sorry, just saying there's so much to talk about. I'm kind of just throwing out there where you guys want to splather on and what we can get into before Jared has to go. So I'm excited. I want to get you in here, Jared, before you have to head out. So which topic interested you the most?
Well, I mean, I am interested in just generally what it would be like to build a society that is, let's say, less hierarchical than the one that we currently have. I think that's an interesting question to ask, and one that I think really is present throughout this book. And what's really interesting to me is that on Anaris, it's like the way that hierarchy sneaks back in. It's not just because of the rationing and the PDC. They even admit that a lot of people view the PDC with suspicion because they kind of know it's not purely anarchist. It's not Odonian in the speak here. But like the example with Sabel, right? The older physicist who really kind of exploits Shevek. And it's a really interesting way where the hierarchies kind of have a tendency to crop up if you're not consciously against them, if you're not consciously trying to maintain a non-hierarchical system. That's, I think, pretty interesting. And wondering, like, is it... And another broader question, and maybe this is another place where we just disagree, is how desirable is a world without hierarchy? Because in my mind, a world without hierarchy, especially a world without involuntary hierarchy, sounds pretty dang good, right? But I don't. Maybe the two of you just don't even think that.
That's probably a disagreement on my part, and
both sides of it. Of one, I don't find striving for a world without hierarchy in like on its own, not in just hierarchies, but just hierarchies, full stop, removal of it. I don't find that desirable, virtuous, or whatever have you. And then in addition, the idea that even with to remove hierarchy, it has to be constantly washed and how it can slip back in there. I didn't find that even particularly interesting. To me, I'm like, yeah. That did not interest me.
Well, there's on the one hand, so there's two things. There's the the realistic aspect of it. How realistic would this be? Which again, it's a thought experiment. But to me, the first thing is with this anarchical state, if the experiment has to be that you have to have a moon where you send a cult sect, not a cult, a revolutionary sect that
homogenous, fully bought in group
that goes onto this planet, and you have a scarce planet. You set up all these scenarios to make it so that this can exist. So that's the first thing of taking reality out of it. She sets it up in a way to show this is let's say sci-fi,
the most possible. Yeah. Whatever contrivances we could do. Like
I'm sorry. That's just simply wrong. That's just the thing you just there is just simply wrong. Anaris isn't the most possible place, right? In fact, an Odonian society on Eurus would actually be easier to operate because there would be such an abundance of nature and of goods.
Well, that's
a more interesting question because historically speaking, and this is another discussion, but kind of the resource rich curse, like the resource curse throughout history of we see nations and different peoples where the land is actually full of resources yet has some of the most amount of chaos, infighting, and conflict, versus you see places often very like the Nordic countries and places with very few resources tend to be less chaotic and less.
And
violent.
the thought might be like in harsher climates or harsher environments, people kind of naturally have to band together. You have to have a stronger sense of solidarity if you're ever going to like make it, perhaps
mutually.
But I think at least in the book, I think at least in the book, the scarcity on Anaris is meant to be a real problem because it introduces crisis.
Famine.
There's a famine. There's an extended famine. There are no animals on Anaris, basically. There are some fish.
Yeah.
They don't eat meat of any kind, which they might partly do for moral reasons. But there is like the truth also that meat is a easy access to like protein and fat, which people need. And so they have to do a lot of work agriculturally to make sure that they can actually feed people, which requires a huge amount of coordination. And that coordination, of course, puts the pressure on their ability to run a non-hierarchical, non-ordered society.
Yeah, and there's two parts to that. Like there's the realistic and idealistic part of what Le Guin's writing here, and so the realistic part of you're right to say that, hey, look, the PDCs actually kind of acts as a bureaucracy. We see micro violence. We see stones being thrown. Someone gets do they die? I think that the person gets killed is thrown at. Or we see
no, the person in the very beginning who gets a stone
stone
thrown at him. I believe that's Shevek. He gets hit in the head because it's mentioned later in that chapter that he doesn't even notice it.
Right. Gets stone thrown at him.
I think one other person gets hit. I think
another person gets hit.
Okay.
I mean, you have the Chevet versus Shevek, that situation. You have a hoarder, you have Sabol and his ego. So I think the problem that I have with it too. So on the realistic aspect of it's first setting up this anarchical society that lasted 200 years, yet still shows that human nature still prevails, of as much conditioning as you're giving, as much education as you're giving, that there is still microcosms of violence. And to me, so Le Guin, to go out of this,
anarchist societies being so fragile you don't need a majority of dissidents. You just need a very small number of people. And
my issue with that is, so Le Guin also believes this in like the mutual aid as a versus social Darwinism, and showing that, hey, we're not just these selfish, like, hey, social Darwinist survival of the fittest species. We actually cooperate way more than we'd imagine. I'm an optimist, and I love that hey, look, we do actually coordinate on small scales. As soon as you add more and more numbers, and Le Guin does show this is a place with 20 million plus people, it's a place that does have microcosms of violence. The fundamental principle I disagree with is, it seems this book says that micro-violence and micro-violence and these micro-egos and these situations where hierarchies do start to form cannot scale because the state causes the worst of humanity. It's not the microcosms of violence, the microcosms of stealing or whatever. And I would answer that and go, it's the state does not precede violence. Violence precedes the state. If there is a violent actor or something, and there's one person that apparently, this is why I would have liked it if it was more absurd. She does show that there's dissonance. She does show that she tries to make it realistic, which is where it's flawed to me, because if that does exist, the logical conclusion of it is one person with stick gets angry. Why not the second person with stick? And what does the anarchical state have to punish you? Well, no prisons, no police force, no state. They just have they'll kind of socially ostracize you.
And also potentially mob violence.
And if that's mob violence, then you know what I'll do? Well, I don't like that mob did that. My mob's I kind of want your stuff. So she acknowledges that human nature does exist, but doesn't bring it to what the logical conclusions. I would have way more believed this if this society is like 2 years in or something. But she's saying for 200 years, the existence of this state exists with these microcosms.
20 million people.
20 million people. So it's just, that's where I'm just going. I disagree with the premise. Violence precedes that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at this hierarchical nature of this. So I've been rambling.
I think this is again an example of, you just hate the world building so much that the themes and the thought provokingness.
Do you disagree that does the state precede violence, or does violence precede the state?
Well, no, I think what it is clearly there is violence that does not involve the state, but also sort of like the definition of the state is that it is something that has a monopoly on legitimate violence, right? And anarchists, kind of by their nature and like in their ideology, question the crucial word there, legitimate. They say the state claims for itself a monopoly on violence, but we say that claim is illegitimate. But they are a non-violent anarchist sect. That's kind of Le Guin sets out to be, but it's not an anarchist set that is completely free of violence. That part is true. There is violence.
There's violence, yeah.
on Anaris. They do not have mass coordinated war like you have on Eurus, which is kind of going on in the background. There's always a war, kind of like the Cold War, happening on Eurus.
And that's why I think it's wrong, because war would happen. War doesn't just people if people can go against the conditioning and there's violence that acts, that's all you need. Just acknowledge that humanity has an ego. Acknowledge that, and then the conclusion to that is there has to there. So there's never existed in our. Oh, sorry, I hear echo on your end, by the way, from our voices. I don't know if it's breaking.
Sorry, my headphones started buzzing out on me, and let me try again.
Oh yeah, we're good. We're good.
It does this sometimes if I'm on the call for too long. All right, that should maybe be better. All right, I can hear you better now. Okay, so the thing Le Guin is doing, I think, I mean, she is proposing a kind of fantastical world, a highly speculative one. So it's not, is it realistic? No, but like, no, I mean, let me actually contrast this. And I'm doing this partly to annoy you, but also because I think it's relevant.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but like the world building in Red Rising is like total bullshit from this perspective too, right? Because you would be like, wait, like how were the Reds so thoroughly indoctrinated? How were the Reds so thoroughly brainwashed that they thought they were just doing the mining, and it turns out there's like a garden world above them? And why even would the Golds keep the Reds under those conditions for so long? Why wouldn't they just do things that were at least like slightly tolerably better? I mean, there's lots of like weird world building questions you could ask about Red Rising.
Yeah.
And the question is, but if you want to read the book, you just kind of have to buy in a little bit, right? And you have to, why the hell did they name all the social classes colors? Like, were they children? You know, like so you look at this and just go, yeah, there's just dumb, weird choices that are being made, but it's in service of this larger point. It's in service of the larger story. And Le Guin's like, let me try to give you an anarchist world that is really the best version of it that I can try. And she's still showing that it falls short. But the thing is, we're so quick to point to it and be like, see, that's where Anaris falls short. See, that's where Anaris is unrealistic. But I think she's trying to kind of wake you up from that dogmatic slumber to like look at our own world and be like, why do we tolerate all the bad stuff here too? Because at least the Odonians are trying. At least the Odonians are trying to make things better. But are we trying to make things better here, or are we just accepting all the bad stuff with the rationalization that this is just how things are? And what she's trying to say is like the Odonians are trying to tell you it doesn't have to be this way. We can't guarantee you perfection, but we can at least offer you something different.
Yeah, and
at the end of the book, hold on, trust me. At the end of the book, Shavek is going back to his planet, and one of the Hanes, one of the sailors or the crew members, one of the Hanes says he wants to go to Anaris as well, and he says that the Hanes have been around for so long that they've basically tried every form of politics they can. They've even tried anarchism, and they've seen the flaws in everything basically. And then he says, but I want to see it for myself. And that's what inspires him to go there, to go to Anaris. And I think that's kind of what Le Guin is doing. She's saying, I just want to see if you want to check it out for yourself.
Yes. And so even talking about the ideal as well. So first we're just talking on the realistic aspect. And to answer the question.
There's two aspects here of the realistic. Let's discount the realism.
Well, I just want to answer the Red Rising slander first.
Okay. I'll speak after that. Then.
The reason the what if happens is it's all sci-fi is a what if. What if this, then what happens, right? So if you were to ask the question of like, hey, what if I gave you Middle Earth and this fantastical land, and all of a sudden a plane flew by? Every reader in their right mind would look at that and go, what kind of shitty anachronism is that, Tolkien? Why is there a plane where we don't have any of that technology to make a plane, right? I'm just showing the example of just because it's fantasy sci-fi doesn't mean that anything could happen. You still have to work within the frames, the internal consistency of your world. And where Red Rising, to me, is internally consistent is because of the caste system and the hierarchy that exists, and looking at why do the golds oppress the reds is all explained in the book to me perfectly, and it makes sense. And why do the golds send their... So we can get into the whole Red Rising thing.
That it would make sense in our world.
No, it makes sense within the world that is set up. And so within the world Le Guin set up, the main point is she doesn't make this an absurd thing. She doesn't make this like, this is Discworld absurdism. She shows, look, here's a world I'm creating on Anaris. I'm also going to, because she's saying a thought experiment, trying to make us think about the real world. It's like a one-to-one. Hey, look, here's the U.S., here's Soviet Union. She wants you to take away lessons of the real world. She has to show that, look, human nature still exists. So in her own thought experiment, why it doesn't work for me,
but she does show that human nature still exists. She still shows that there are petty jealousies, that there are people who want to dominate other people.
That's my point. That's my point.
It's expanding it out of like
the fact that exists.
Why is it a one-off rather than endemic?
And
with a population of 20 million people over 200 years, there isn't one like 10,000. A couple thousand people on Anaris that go, we're done with this anarchism. We're actually going to go back to a form of proprietarianism, and we're going to structure ourselves and have our own society.
There are people, for instance, who choose not to live basically with anybody else, and maybe they go and form little communities or something like this, but they kind of remove themselves from Odonian society. That's mentioned. I mean, I guess what it's like. We also see that on Anaris, there is admittedly a kind of large-scale effort to control the thoughts of everyone, to even change the language that is spoken so that people think in a particular way. And education starts very, very early as well to kind of teach them this values. Because I think what it is that the Odonians are optimist about the perfectibility of human nature. They think that we can take human nature and we can make it better. That doesn't always work. We do see that it fails, but they keep trying, right? Where on Eurus, what happens is people are kind of like, humans are like this. And they use that kind of shrugging to rationalize a lot of kind of horrific practices, a really rigid class system, a really terrible way of treating women. And it's always explained as like, but that's how things are. That's human nature. Could you even imagine it any other way? And the Odonians are yelling, yes, we can imagine it. We can try. And that's that thing here. I think guys, you're very willing to point out the lack of realism on Anaris. I think a little unfairly, admittedly, but we can just disagree. Mm-hmm. But you're not willing, I think, to then take that same critical look and think about our world as shown through Eurus. You're kind of doing that shrugging a little bit. Don't you think so?
No, I also think that
Anaris, our own world, has plenty of flaws that need to be worked on. I just don't accept the solution that is presented here.
Yeah, this
rather than like, so a lot of this is not just about the practicality; it's about the ideal. So because how many times people will say like argue different forms of government, and a classic example of how people argue is for their own side, they're arguing the ideal of their system against the reality of the other. And fundamentally, it is wrong. That's a wrong thing to do. You can either compare to the ideals, compare that, or compare the realities that we have of historical real-life examples. It's unfair to compare, the unreality, reality against an ideal. Do you
think that's what Le Guin is doing? She's comparing the ideal against the reality of Eurus?
No.
Okay.
I believe in this story, I'm looking at. I believe the statement that Le Guin is saying here is ultimately that Anaris has a valuable ideal that it is reaching toward, and ultimately flawed in execution due to all these different factors, but that the goal is still good, and that Urus has a fundamentally wrong or evil or bad ideal that it is striving for, but it does have positives in its journey. Of it shows like, hey, the Urus is wrong in its direction and its ideals, but it does get to have art. hey, look, it is really good at resource management.
Yeah.
So
And
it does.
It has
tons of
better
research.
technology. It is where you go if you want to make real scientific progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess, is throughout this book, I was unconvinced of the ideals of, I don't believe that Uros's ideals are necessarily bad. And I don't believe that Anaris's ideals were inherently good. Of whenever I'm on Anaris and I'm being shown the positives, I do not see that as a consequence of Anaris's anarchism. I'm not convinced of the ideal of it. The ideal of a removal of hierarchy, the removal of these kind of structures. So I mean that I'm judging that. There's the reality of it aside. That's its own debate. I was unconvinced with those.
I would love to respond, guys, but I've hit my hour. I've got to go. I'm so sorry.
Jared.
But I have to go take care of my kid. I have a pregnant wife and a kid.
And you know what?
Don't be a propertarian. No.
We are going to be talking about that a little later.
Yes.
An interesting point of the one thing that Shevek takes, that he is more like Uros than he is like Anaris, is his connection with his family and taking a personal responsibility and ownership of his family and his direct descendants.
It's Jared.
Arguably the only good thing he saw on Uros was the family he had dinner with. We're going to be getting into that. Jared, it's great to have you, and I'm glad you're putting your family
thank
first.
you for. I know you already knew we disagreed with you. Thank you for doing this, and we you know it would be like a contentious one, so we appreciate it.
Absolutely, no, this was great. I feel like I learned nothing about the Dispossessed, but I learned a lot about you guys.
All right, we'll try to clarify that now. But thank you, Jared.
All right, take care, guys.
All right, we'll continue on with reviewing it. But yeah, so I was sad that he had to go for the idea part of it, the ideating. Oh, are we all good on that?
I'm just ending the recording here.
Yep. Sweet.
And we can continue on.
All
Nick?
right. Yes. But yeah, on the idea aspect of the book, that is where I was hoping to get some Jared's thoughts on that, because when it comes to the ideal this is going for of the hierarchy itself being gone, the removal of hierarchy, where I was trying to get at that point about the violence versus the state, of how violence precedes the state, and how just the fact that exists and on the realistic part of the book means why does that not expand? I disagree with the with the premise that if you are not conditioned, if everyone's not like, this isn't 1984 has a state to actually fight against this. Anarchy has no enforcement mechanism is the problem, where you show that these violent acts happen. She does not present it in what I would see as an honest way of storytelling, because for 200 years I don't see that society existing with the fact that a violent act or the fact that human ego is still there. So
and out of 20 million, there isn't a handful of dedicated individuals that are dissenters.
Especially resource scarce, and then you just get a group and go, hey, I want your things. That's it. So on the idealistic part of hierarchy of not existing, right, in the Dispossessed, what Le Guin's getting at here, of I'll read this passage because this is what I just pulled the tab out as I was going to the page.
Look for the sticky page.
Damn it. Where was it? Oh, no. Okay, here it is. Found it. Sticky page. Okay. Here we go. So, this is it here. Yep, right there. So this is what Shevek says, like page 322 toward the end of the book. He says, there is nothing on Urus that we and Oresti need. We left with empty hands 170 years ago, and we were right. We took nothing because there is nothing here but states and their weapons, the rich in their lies, and the poor in their misery. There is no way to act rightly with a clear heart on Urus. There is nothing you can do that profit does not enter into, and fear of loss and the wish for power. You cannot say good morning without knowing which of you is superior to the other or trying to prove it. You cannot act like a brother to other people. You must manipulate them or command them or obey them or trick them. You cannot touch another person, yet they will not leave you alone. There is no freedom. It is a box. Urus is a box, a package with all the beautiful wrapping of blue sky and meadows and forests and great cities. And you open the box, and what's inside it? A black cellar full of dust and a dead man, a man whose hand was shot off because he held it out to others. I have been in hell at last. Dessar was right. It is Urus. Hell is Urus. Right. So we see this journey of the positives of Urus, but then actually showing the under society of look at this, like the extreme wealth and the extreme poverty, and like saying things about the U.S. Yeah, there's criticisms here, and certainly, like we'll get to Urus in that whole section, but Chevek's journey by the end is showing propertarianism, this sort of view, like this hierarchies ought to not exist, and having a superior, having a boss, this is ought to not exist.
That profit is such an ingrained aspect that it corrupts every aspect, and profit itself is evil and these kind of things. So yeah, I remain unconvinced of just that idea.
It really comes down to the thing of I don't see I see the lack of hierarchy in this presentation of the ideal on Anaris. When I was reading it, seeing it, how dystopian it was, of the family, of you not having your child, of how relationships worked on Anaris, the entire system. I was constantly going for where was the positive aspect that the ideal we're supposed to live up to, and it's supposed to be that ultimate freedom. And to me, that anarchistic spirit, that ultimate freedom, so long as you help others, because I want to be fair to it, is saying freedom, but also as long as it's empathetic freedom, which
all right, that's
like,
already a reduction in, like, not everyone believes in mutual aid.
And also, what is your version of empathy? What
is your version of, like, good for society? Well, defined by who?
Again,
that's different between people.
And people are always going to disagree. And so I see this anarchistic spirit, this lack of hierarchy, as more, I don't want to say people that believe in this or like the book. This is not subject to them, but as being more prideful and thinking that ultimate freedom and having nobody above you, nobody superior, nothing, it's you, your ultimate free spirit experience. I would ask the question, free to do what? Like, why? I don't see hierarchies as evil. Hierarchies can certainly be evil. There's tons of awful states, awful people have done something because they've abused, oppressed, that all exists. But to me, the lack of a police force, the lack of a state is not a bad. A good police force, a good state should be fought for. Like, hierarchies of obviously realistically are always going to exist. People even disagree with that statement. I think history and even this book shows that hierarchy would exist. But the point on the lack of hierarchy being an ideal, I was not convinced by it, because what did Anaris have that was worthy to live up to in the first place? To me, I didn't see the benefits. I didn't see this advantageous aspect of Anaris. Did you? I mean,
and
that point of hierarchy, right?
One would argue, watching this video, it would be saying the lack of violence, that it is far less violent. There are no wars. To that, I'm arguing, doubt it, because of all the things we've talked about previously, that ultimately, when it comes down to the purpose of government, or society in general, is the preservation of a certain people's way of life from internal and external threats. If your system of government cannot, or system of organization, because I know anarchism is not government, get off me. If it cannot deal with that idea of how do you defend a group of people's way of life against internal and external threats, your system is not worth considering. There are so many systems of organization that differ wildly, that ultimately have to deal with that premise, and anarchism doesn't. And that's why I will agree with your statement that you posted on Instagram and YouTube. I find it silly. I find it a silly concept to deal with. This is one of those things of anarchism can only exist within a system that will voluntarily protect them, while they don't have to protect themselves. Like, we were talking about how why does no other planet invade Anaris? Clearly, they do have resources. There is mining to be done there. It is this planet that doesn't have a military, doesn't have any way to defend itself. Why are they not invaded by, of course, let's say Urus doesn't believe it's worth it. Why are they not invaded by anyone else, by these other planets? The reason they're not invaded is because they're Urus's moon. And Urus is the one that actually defends Anaris. Like, if I'm to believe, like, what I'm in this world going, yeah, Anaris is in some ways the mining planet of Uros. If another planet tried to invade Anaris, it would be Uros that would stand in the way and say, no, you will not take Anaris. So this anarchist society can only exist within the protection of Uros.
Yeah, I think that's acknowledged.
That right there makes, to me, I'm like, that is a silly system. But we were getting on to the more individual aspect of the value of freedom. And, I do say frequently that democracy is cringe, but I also don't value, or at least I imagine we both don't value freedom in and of itself. I don't see freedom as a inherent good. It's not valuable in and of itself. It's freedom to do what?
Like, I don't have the freedom to punch you, right?
Exactly.
Well, I kind of do.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
But yeah, freedom itself is not particularly valuable on its own. It is, like many things, a tool. And, the job of the state, the job of societal organization is the balancing of freedom to do good things while, stopping the freedom of others to do whatever is harmful to the way of life of a particular people.
I find that idea of hierarchy not hierarchy, that idea of anarchy as like the self and being free to do, so long as it's empathetic toward the other person. So I want to add that nuance of it's like free to do so. It's not saying that you can just go kill people. I get that. It's nonviolent anarchy as that's presented. But at the core of that, it's who is the superior? It's yourself. You are the top of your totem pole. Nobody is above other people. And in our hearts and our guts kind of want to say like, oh, that's good. Equality, that's good. Like, yeah, there's nobody above. That's great. You are just above the totem pole like everybody else is. And that kind of pyramid, it would be a flat pyramid, so not a pyramid, to put yourself at the top is so you have no superior, no inferior, to me is look at every aspect of life, like even in a marriage, which, you become one. Specialty exists and you have hierarchies in certain things. Like Nicole, my better half, comes to our kids one day. She's a doctor. She's going to do all the medicine stuff, all of it. I don't want to, whatever it is. Yep, sounds good. It would be stupid for me to go, no, I think we're equal on this hierarchy. We should have equal decision making of like, I know just as much as you do about health. Like even something as simple that every decision, every little aspect of life has hierarchy. Everything.
Well,
so it's
Anaris does have, to some degree, a reduction in specialization because of the lack of hierarchy.
Exactly.
Not the complete elimination of it, because there are individuals that they like what they do and so they continue doing it, and therefore individually they become specialized. But with what Anaris does show us is that specialization is often underutilized and ultimately wasted on people like Shevek. Shevek being...
He could be a physicist. And
he is a physicist.
Yeah.
He is the top of his hierarchy. And yet, because there is no hierarchy, you basically depress the special and the excellent people in your society. And I don't find that a particularly good ideal. It's, if anything, the things that we should be striving for is better hierarchies that promote and reward people of good virtue, of excellent abilities, and eliminating the hierarchies based on, corruption and abuse or lies, and those are the hierarchies to tear down. But you should be promoting these virtuous hierarchies, and that's where I was left unconvinced by this story.
And it's also, to me, a more act of humility, a more act of lack of ego to go, hey, I am not like, yeah, you are better than me at this. I will look to this person when making this decision, or I will look to this organization because this cause or whatever it might be. Just because there's somebody that's a boss of you is not inherently bad or evil. Like just this kind of boogeyman of like the fact that there are people above and below. Like not, again, we like to think in the oppressor sense, but it's not in the case of like there's somebody oppressing. I don't mean in those there are bad hierarchies. Again, it's I
want to give a little aside story.
Give an aside story. It's about time we got to cool down and
get a little
fun. Yeah.
It's something that me in my current job, and I'm not giving any like particular details, but there is something when when you have a close relationship with your coworkers,
Yeah.
and there is very much like the clear hierarchy of you're all coworkers, and there is that one boss. And as coworkers, you're looking at you're always able to criticize the boss of the boss is kind of running me, he doesn't know what they're doing, all these type of things. And something kind of always bothered me a little bit with it, and I try to push back even in my own company of like I can acknowledge like the flaws or the perceived flaws that I would say of like my complaints of the boss of like, I think my boss is wrong on this and this and that, and I can commiserate. But there is a certain attitude of like, yeah, the boss offers nothing, they're just kind of skimming off the top and all this, and even in my own company, and there's kind of that attitude. And I'm the one kind of pushing back of like, you understand we're doing a lot of the work, but we wouldn't have work to do without him. Like, we have to serve clients, and our boss is literally an expert at finding clients for us to work. Without them, we wouldn't have a paycheck. Not just like, they're the ones that literally writing the check. No, they are doing the work of finding us people to do work for, and that's incredibly valuable. I'm not going to discount entirely the point that there's a reason why they're there. There's a great purpose that they have. I may have my complaints, but to discount that entirely, is silly to me. I do have a level of respect for my boss of like, man, they're the one bringing in the work. It's something I just noticed a difference even in my own work life.
Yeah, I get you. And from that, like Jared, I'm sure others who read this too, I understand the spirit of it's not coming from a bad place at all. So so anybody that is reading this book and going like, everybody's had a bad boss, everybody's had like a bad principal. We understand not having somebody above, and you just feel that frustration because I'm sure plenty of people have been frustrated at their bosses. Mm-hmm. The answer to that, to me, is not ultimate freedom and ignoring that these exist and that these are thing. It's about okay. Here's the thing too, because the way that AIO is presented with proprietarianism, and it's looking at this extreme form of capitalism and representation of the U.S. Really,
it's not even an extreme form of capitalism. It's just our world. It's just not much different.
Oh, sorry, I said extreme because I'm thinking of the assault scene, and I think I'm just connecting that with like that's not good. The assault on AIO, very very bad. But the aspect so here's another aspect to that assault scene which we were talking about earlier, that happening and happening on AIO, of just the fact that it doesn't exist. We don't see a scene like that on Anaris. I would have been fascinated to see how does each society react to an assault like that, and the fact that we see like stones throwing, violent acts, and people do have an ego, that it still does exist. Again, in the reality that's presented in this book, it still exists. So, assumedly, sexual assault also exists there. If you're going to say that,
it is mentioned in the book that it happens.
Yeah,
but it's more of a they are socially shamed, and or if they won't leave, they are, met with a bunch of boots. They're kicked out to this, like either that or killed. But getting to that point, the book is saying that sexual assault was caused by the worldview of what AIO?
Yeah,
was it
AIO? Yep.
And I just disagree with that standpoint, and going, no, that existed more of just Shevik's desires, lack of inhibitions, and that kind of mentality still exists on Anaris. And so it was always a constant of Uros and AIO. All of its flaws are because it's due to the system, the state.
But our answer
all
is,
the flaws on Anaris is due to external factors or human nature being flawed at implementing a noble ideal, and not so. It's always the flaws of Anaris is not its system, it's human nature, failure to implement external problems. And with Uros, it's the system is always at fault, not human nature and all these things. And that was the disconnect that I had there. Maybe I read it wrong, but that's how I was seeing it.
I get you. And seeing that, seeing how AIO and the assault scene and how, obviously too, looking at a war that is bad. The war is bad. All these, as Shavek's journey, CCC's, oh, look at this supposedly great society with all this resources and all these benefits, and comes to find out that it's way worse than Anaris because it's hell. Look at all the flaws of this society. At least our ideals are worth striving for, right? That and Le Guin being writing this in the 1970s as well. You can understand, like, hey, Soviet Union versus U.S., all the contextual stuff that was happening at the time.
Le Guin being a feminist, the year that she wrote this book was the year that, I know we talked about briefly, it's not the year that women were able to get credit cards on their own, but it was anti-discrimination laws.
Anti-discriminate laws, and like that's what's happening at the time.
Women could get credit cards on their own before that, but it was significantly less due to, discrimination based, and we can get into details on that. But point being, Le Guin is writing this at a time with sexism and feminism being a major factor in her life and other people and other women at her time. I can see why living in a system that, a state, an apparatus that oppresses you, or at the very least you perceive it that way, why you would say, it's not my individual. It's not my fellow man, fellow woman that is keeping me down. It is this state apparatus that is actively against me, not my fellow man. And why maybe anarchism is more attractive to someone like Le Guin.
Certainly, and seeing in the book's view as well that these women are treated like property, so it makes the case that of course that would be bad if you treat a person like property and have this sort of egotistical mindset of you are if that does, you can be power over somebody else. You can, in that hierarchy, Shavek was higher than Vea and could assault her in that scene. So it's showing, rightfully so. Again, it shows, that does exist, and that is bad. That is bad. But the alternative solution to that is that on this anarchist planet, where again we won't get into the reality of it. We'll, I guess, talk more about the world building. But the solution to that is erase hierarchies and be completely free, and all that stuff that sounds good, but in reality, freedom. Can you be so free that you're just a slave to you go full circle like the simultaneity theory? You are so free that you are a slave to yourself in a way. I see this as putting
a slave
more
to your
chains.
desires and ultimately being chained to your every whim, and so you become isolated from everyone else. And I mean, hey, that does tie into Shavek's story of isolation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that loneliness. Yeah, so I don't want to beat that to death too much, because the themes are presented the way it's very. I don't know if you've been doing a great job right now, and you've explained yourself really well. I don't even know if I'm doing a great job of. It's a complex book, so it's thematically deep. It's almost a bit difficult to try to explain thoughts of why it didn't connect. It's
by our definition of this book has provoked a lot of thoughts.
Oh yeah.
Fair enough. We are clearly talking a lot about it, but from our scale of did something, change our way of thinking or make us think something new about the world versus, that being 5 out of 5 floored us of it is our new, either it changed our minds on something or made us think about maybe didn't change our minds, but made us think in a different way. It's now our new example versus the other side being insulting is the furthest mark. I walk away from this book of not thinking any differently from how I really walked into it, and being left unconvinced, and I wouldn't really use this as an example in any kind of thought experiment in my head, particularly. So that's why I'm on the, very disappointing.
And there's a section here which talking about freedom and talking about what changes, and because a big part of this book is that the revolution needs to constantly happen. Because at the end of the book we see Shavek goes back to home planet. He releases the communication device so that all the planets can be interconnected in that way. And he says, you know what, I need to go back at Odo's to keep Odo, the original spirit alive, we need to constantly change. So this is a passage from the book. Change is freedom, change is life. It's always easier not to think for oneself. Find a nice, safe hierarchy and settle in. Don't make changes, don't risk disapproval, don't upset your syntax. It's always easiest to let yourself be governed. There's a point around age 20 when you have to choose whether to be like everybody else the rest of your life or to make a virtue of your peculiarities. I like that line. That's a really nice line. Those who build walls are their own prisoners. I'm going to go fulfill my proper function in the social organism. I'm going to go unbuild walls. And day to day, life's a hard job. You get tired. You lose the pattern. You need distance, interval. The way you see how beautiful the earth is to see it as the moon. The way to see how beautiful life is from the vantage point of death. And Le Guin's a great writer. Like how well is that put, right? Like that. Yeah. That's great lines. But it's that message there of find a nice safe hierarchy and settle in. Don't make changes. Don't risk disapproval. Which there's that spirit, that again, that revolutionary spirit to the book of, hey, don't just settle in. Don't just accept because there is the higher up. Don't just accept that and live and let live, because evil can prevail in that case. Like constant change, be a skeptic. Push. And it seems like that is that kind of spirit, like the people that have the thematic depth to it, makes sense. I see and understand that kind of spirit invigorating in the book of how that's compelling and moving. That I mean, to people that read it, did you agree that? What did you think about that whole? Why people that like? I'm trying to now give, since Jared's not here, I'm trying to give the other side and then our thoughts as well. So
of course, from that standpoint, I understand that mentality of. The revolutionary spirit of always wanting to change, of that there is a difference between being willing to change and desiring change for change's sake, and that change is good in and of itself.
Right.
And that is a tendency, I think, at some point I maybe agreed with more, and at least now don't particularly agree. Like, I don't think it is revolution for revolution's sake is particularly valuable. But being completely unwilling to change is also not virtuous. But I lean toward more the tendency to listen to our forebears and understand, to not egoize, of not thinking that I myself am sole arbiter of truth and I've thought of everything, and that my thought process on things is the tantamount, and that I will tend to listen to the wisdom of elders and my past, while still questioning and still pushing, being willing and open to change. But my tendency is, if I am unconvinced, to listen to the wisdom of others and our past. So, but I can see there was something about the comment section of looking at other reviews of this book, and
we do recognize we're in the minority. Like, a lot of people love this book. So
there's something that Jared said, and I've read as well several times, is I think many anarchists will read this book and feel emotionally drawn to it, because in a way it does kind of break down the walls around their belief of anarchism. Maybe in some ways this is far more of the quote-unquote antidote to anarchism, because that was something that I read many times in comments of this book. While they may still be anarchists, made them question the ideals of anarchism and question the feasibility of it. And that moment of hierarchies having to be constantly monitored, where they're so easy to creep up, even after, that's a moving scene for many anarchists, going like, oh wow, that's something I have, that's internal, of how many walls do I have inside myself that I don't know about. I think that I'm being a revolutionary. I think about ultimate freedom, and then I myself have to be vigilant about these things.
Yeah.
I can see that being moving to someone, versus someone like me. That wasn't moving, because I'm kind of already aware. At least I've at least got past it of understanding that, or at least I had that moment already.
I think you're doing a very good job at explaining point of view of many who are watching, because that is clearly it did touch a lot of people. And so trying to explain correctly why it didn't thematically resonate. I think another part of this that was appreciated, that how speech and language was used in the book.
It's probably the part of the aspect I agreed with the most, or I thought was most thoughtful. the idea that, we think through language. When you think about things, it is through words in your own head. Whoever controls language controls how you think. And it is very important. It exists in almost every single dystopian novel, so it's also present here. Of if a culture does, a culture can manipulate people by changing words and changing the definition of things. And often this happens via academia or just the social zeitgeist. Hey, which words are not acceptable to say? Or, hey, this word means this now. Ultimately, removing ways of thinking. And so I thought that was very interesting. But I've seen that kind of stuff before in 1984, Brave New World, Clockwork Orange. That's a common thing.
Yeah, and well, talking about all those books, those dystopias, right? It's this was the first novel, to my understanding, that did tackle what if an anarchy was a utopia, and first book written, I believe, not talking about anarchy. It was a fictional book setting up an anarchical utopia, an ambiguous utopia, as the subtitle says. And so that was the premise of it. I think why it hadn't been done to that point is you have to set these very unique conditions to get it to work in the first place. And again, what I would ask in the revolution, this revolutionary book, it's revolt, but revolt against what? I can understand revolting against a bad state, but I don't think the anarchical answer of revolt and the end goal is anarchy.
More revolting. Always revolt. Always change. Always tear down walls. And it's like,
I think France had one too many revolutions. We should have cut them off at a certain point and just stick with it.
Here's the thing. There's a moment in this book with Shevek trying to tear down the walls of Anaris and bring in Uros. And, hey, we should, and him saying, like, hey, we should bring a few individuals from Uros to Anaris, tear down these walls.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, no. If in the council said, if you do that, like, okay, it's a handful of individuals now. Next it'll be a settlement. And then ultimately they will conquer us, they will colonize us. And we will completely lose our way of life. Yeah, that's completely right. And by the end of this book, it's Shevek that goes, no, Uros is hell. We need nothing from them, and I go there empty hands. We left with nothing, and I continue to go back home with nothing because it is hell. The wall stays up. So
yeah, there's nothing this society can do for us.
It's one of those things of, hey, maybe this would be question walls. Question.
Mm-hmm.
But you shouldn't tear down every wall. Sometimes, if you want to protect your way of life,
I'm keeping a big wall between you and I.
Exactly.
I stay emotionally distant.
At one point.
Sexually. At one point, what?
At one point.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I interrupted your point. Yeah.
But no, it's
first very stupid joke. So.
Yes. No, walls can be unjust, but they can also be very necessary. And maybe that is the lesson of the Dispossessed, that, Shevek was thinking to be the revolutionary to tear down all walls, and then he goes back home and goes, actually, we need a few of those. A few walls is good.
They're pro-gatekeeping.
Maybe not every wall. Let's keep some walls up.
The even fact of the gatekeeping, there has to be a hierarchy in gatekeeping of like, okay.
Yeah, ultimately, even Anaris has a very basic hierarchy of
which it's all
Anaris is above Uros. It is like
Uros is Anaris is above. Well, to them. Their ideological hierarchy is
Odonians value, like, put Odonians at the top of their hierarchy below Uros.
Uros is worse.
They will give preferential treatment. They will give more authority and more value. Like, they will protect Odonians over Uros. That is their value of thinking, because it is my way of life against that way of life. And if I want to preserve my way of life, I need to, our systems, our way of lives are not compatible, and therefore must be kept separate. And I must defend mine. I mean, maybe that's the lesson Shevek learns, and that's the point I'm supposed to get from this book.
There is a lot of purposeful contradictions too in the book. Again, being ambiguous utopia. I've said that 20,000 times. Okay, so the contradictions, you go, okay, on Anaris, they want to be this anarchical society, but they still accept resources from Uras because they're resource scarce and they hate doing it, but they have to. So it's ends justifying the means thereof. They're doing things that they would love not to, but have to. And so there's this contradiction. So Le Guin is toying around with this concept and not she's not being, what do you call it? This book could be written worse, like in a lot of ways. But she's toying with the concept and showing no, she's not saying Anaris is perfect. She's not saying this anarchical ideal. It's not like necessarily this manifesto in that sense. She's not saying, look how everything's so great. I guess the issue you and I have is we're trying to find what's one thing that's good is our thing, because Shevek goes back to Anaris and just trying to go like, what again, if it read more of it's an ambiguous utopia is what it's supposed to be, and I read it as a dystopia, and I don't think that was the intention. That's not how it was read to me, and that's why it wasn't thematically thought-provoking. Of what it comes down to is there was supposed to be something here I could garner and use in my life, but I'm looking at this and going, well, first off, AIO is presented too. You see how there's awful stuff going on there as well. But the point, Anaris in this anarchical state, we're supposed to see something of value, of some takeaway. And hey, one of those is it the relationship he learns. But does he learn that from Uras? The relationship with Takvar of, hey, maybe I'm gonna have one partner. Maybe I just won't like treat sex in this way that Anaris does the entire time. And
the Odonian ideal of complete freedom and freedom from freedom of association and like attachment to one individual is, of course, because it's Anaris, they don't outlaw it, but it is deeply frowned upon. And so that is the one thing that he has. I thought it was notable that is the one thing he was actually more closely related to the people of AIO.
Yeah.
EIO? Whatever.
AIO, yeah.
AIO.
Capitalist planet.
Capitalist planet. Capitalist country.
And the country is in there, yeah.
And that the one moment of actual genuine goodness that Shevek saw on the planet, because he sees through the art and the luxury as like this pretty package that hides the darkness beneath it and the emptiness of it. Sees through that. He sees the poor. He sees the wars. He sees the disconnection of like people not willing to help each other. All these things. The one thing he does see value in is when he goes to have dinner with the family, and he thinks he's going into it going, hey, I've seen how these men treat women as second-class citizens. And so he kind of expects this to be a very, lacking of love and a, disrespectful arrangement. And he's quite shocked when he sees, the husband actually respecting his wife, treats her with love, seems to respect the decisions. All these things going, huh, I mean, you're definitely one person at work, but this seems to be a loving family. And then the kids are, kind, playful. There's a feeling of love between all of them. And that's the time that Shevek has one of the better moments on Uras, as he plays with the kids, talks with the family. That it's more similar to the family he has, or at least wants to have back home.
Yeah.
And that is probably the more interesting point I got from this, is if Uras had anything to take away from it, it seems to be their tendency toward valuing individual family relationships and having that exclusivity and that level of hierarchy of valuing your family more than just everybody. That seemed to be the takeaway, at least I got from.
Yeah, this book I question a lot of. It wasn't. There's so many different interpretations I've seen too of people. Some people read this book, take away of this anarchy utopia of, hey, look, this ideal can happen. Some people take it away and look at the things you have to balance between Anaris and Uras. We had a great message from Levy, our patron Levy, who was sending that these contradictions present in the book and the balance between Anaris and Uras and how the point is supposed to be that look at this friction that they both have, right? But then we have there's
which
several different
I do
readings.
fundamentally disagree. It is not this. I don't believe the story is trying to show you like, oh yeah, the truth of the matter. The truth is somewhere in between. It's a balance between statists and anarchists.
Well,
No.
Shevek's stated goal is like, hey,
Shevek's
other
problem
planets
with
help,
Anaris is not that it is too anarchist. It's that it's becoming too statist. He wants to go, no, more anarchist. Like, it's not let's find the balance. It's, no, we were going wrong because we're getting too close to us. We need to go back. So,
yeah.
I don't think I don't think the point of it is at least, let's have a balance between these two worldviews.
The thing, if anything, it balances of looking at an artist of, hey, it presents flaws. Look, there's still flaws in the society. It's still worth striving for as part of that answer. And we've rambled off about this a ton. So there's also other things. The simultaneity theory, we mentioned earlier how the book ends and starts in this kind of circular pattern. So thematically intertwined in that way. Again, it's one of those books that clearly has a lot to say, will land with some better than others. I don't have much else to say on that part. I think world building will be where we. I
guess so.
I have
we
more
already
to say
have,
on that.
We have talked a little bit about it already. So maybe
do we talk about propertarianism a bit, egoism, that kind of thing?
We'll get into it.
Okay, we'll get into it more. What about characters? Would you give that out of 5 stars? Let's see. What
Characters,
you got?
I gave a 2.5.
Disappointing,
and basing this off, and I understand how someone else can be really deeply connected to Shevek's journey. To me, it wasn't. And so I was not, I was only vaguely interested in Shevek, but like the final, 25% of the book.
Gotcha.
I was thoroughly bored with him up until that point. The rest of the characters did not interest me. There we go.
I gave it a 3 stars neutral. You'll see a pattern with mine of like for the motion, the characters, and when we get the plot. I didn't have it. It didn't necessarily connect, but it wasn't bad to me. It was just a vehicle. And I think Shevek as a character, why he's seen as great to others as well. It is a very, if not a thought-provoking book, if it's character focused in his journey of what has he learned, how is he contemplating his society on Anaris, and he actually wants to go out and reach Oras, and his emotional and journey that he goes through. Is he this replaceable character? He's a unique character in that sense. He seems like he comes off as an individual. When reading this book, I could distinguish Shevek from a character from other books easily. He has a very driven purpose. His wants and goals and needs are set up properly. Of okay, he wants to go here. He's contemplating this loneliness and isolation he's having. So he has all these factors that make it as a character, I think, well written enough. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
To reiterate from Jared of Shevek's journey of how he faces isolation from others, how he faces it from himself, of how he becomes disconnected from his own identity, and him doing jobs and work that he doesn't see as valuable, basically alienates himself. Is it where he's lonely even when he's by himself? And then beyond that of striving to balance his own individuality with not being a dick to other people and valuing the social organism. All of that stuff is definitely present. And maybe Jared is right of the world building and
no, he's going to clip that now. He's going to go, maybe Jared is right and just say that.
Well, no, I do tend to agree with him of like the fact that other people can connect with Shevek in this journey and like on paper, I should be able to connect with it too. But because I was so disconnected with the world and the thought-provoking nature that these revelation moments did not interest me. And so I was disconnected from Shevek. I just wasn't interested in him. So that's why I rated it lower. But I can understand someone else really connecting with it, especially, if you're facing those kind of issues. Then I guess I used to, but not anymore. Maybe in a different headspace, in a different time, I would have connected with Shevek more.
Gotcha. Yeah, I looking at this as I'm trying to look more flaws, wants, needs of character. How's the character built? Necessarily on the emotion side, no, I didn't connect as much, but he was written not equally, because I don't want to say this as, I don't want to make this an anarchical state where, it's all no hierarchy here. But in Lathe of Heaven, the characters written, they're not spoiling anything at all. But George Orr and these other characters, written more as a vehicle for the story, right? And in this character, he certainly, I guess all characters are vehicles in some way, but I guess George Orr's written in a peculiar way to where I don't think you're supposed to be emotionally wowed by in Lathe of Heaven. Shevek and this journey, this is probably a wrong opinion in a sense to say. I'm going to use the word clinical because it's so dialogue heavy and focused on Shevek's conversation, his journey through what does he learn, him pushing back that scene, that revelation scene, which is a revelation to Shevek, not us the reader, but him learning about the PDC actually being in control, and that kind of bursting his bubble a bit. He is being open to this new world, as Jared said earlier. It's the Rand going out.
It's the opposite of the farm boy trope, but yeah. Which cool in concept.
Yeah. So Shevek, I'm staying kind of neutral on this stuff because I acknowledge, like, hey, it is. I see all the qualities of this. I was not in the correct headspace because I was not as focused on it, so I don't have much more to say than other people that are reading into this and seeing Shevek as this kind of character. Makes sense. I think the side characters, we have Takvar, Bedap, Sabul, those are some of the significant ones. They fill a role with Sabul being your antagonist and trying to put Shevek down. And at Library of Alexandria said this great. Alan, he has such a funny review of the Dispossessed. He also gave it a 2-star. So when he was reviewing it, he was basically going, "This is Shevek's emotional journey. Physics! I want to do physics right now." Like that was Alan's interpretation, which I thought was hilarious. So he wants to do physics. Sabul stops him from doing physics and stuff. But just wanted to mention the other characters before moving on, if you wanted to say anything else. But sorry, I don't have heavy things to say on this topic.
I have nothing to say about the other characters. Then I don't even think any of them are.
Yeah.
I guess I'll mention one thing is an interesting moment with a character of the Terran ambassador of Shevek basically saying like Urus is hell after that whole statement, and the ambassador from Terran going, "You understand that we look at Urus as a utopia, of comparing it to our home planet that is completely ruined, that just to survive, it has to be, everything is rationed to an extreme degree. We have these different forms of oppression just to, stay alive as a species. We look to Urus as a paradise. And like, where do you think you are? Of like, compare, if you think that's hell, you should come to my home.
I want to see where you're living,
Yeah. And so I thought that was interesting perspective to show at the very end with a Terran representative. But
I should say, part of the messaging there with Terran is Earth.
Yeah.
The actual Earth that we have. And Earth got to 9 billion in population, it says in the book, and collapsed completely and ran out of trees. And basically they I don't know the exact word that's used in there, but they basically led themselves to collapse because their society.
They stripped their environment of every natural resource.
They took, assuming they were proprietarians in that sense too. So again, it kind of focuses again on what I believe the message is, going back to that, just of it's clearly the anarchist ideals, I believe. Okay, let's go on to plot.
Yep.
Plot, I gave it a 3 stars. I was neutral on the plot. So again, my 3 categories there are just neutral.
Sure.
Yeah.
I gave it 3.25, above average.
Oh, hey, come on.
There
Positivity time.
The structure of the story, it fits well with the theme of simultaneity. If I was not so disconnected with the world and themes, I can understand it being more engaging. But
we've said that a lot, but it's getting annoying.
I know. I'm sure it is, but
it's true. It's true for your experience. Yeah. The plot presented in chapters flipping back and forth to present, past, seeing how he grew up to. I mean, you've seen this in other types of books where it's not necessarily present and past, but Project Hail Mary has your present situation, then amnesia flashback. Present situation, amnesia flashback. So that kind of structure, did you enjoy that? I was asking that earlier, Jared. What about you? Did you enjoy that structure?
I very often enjoy that structure in many books, so I have at least enough examples, with Project Hail Mary probably being my favorite of that example of it works very well. It's a story that, yes, you could tell, chronologically, but it would be an ultimately worse story. It's probably the same thing in the Dispossessed. I can imagine this story being way worse if it was told chronologically. Because then being the moment of him leaving Uras, the last flashback chapter of him deciding to leave, would not work well in the middle of this story. It is thematically cathartic. Cathartic is the right word, of the final chapter being, the final two chapters, him deciding to leave for Uras, and then the next chapter, the final chapter, being him happy and deciding to come home. And that's the journey of the Tolkien-esque of a real adventure and a real journey is incomplete until you come back home.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So as a structure, above average. It's just I was uninterested in the minute plot details of everything with the simultaneity stuff. Did not care anything about the physics. Did not care most about the political intrigues of not the wider scope of it, but just the minute details of it. Did not interest me. So,
yeah. I want to say, Scott, again, his idea, what would have been neat, and I think what would have made the book more compelling in that way. So it just felt less. I don't even want to use the word preachy, but please understand what I'm saying by that word. The way of having, if instead of flashing back and flashing forward to Shevek, if we had somebody from AIO that was going, and they kind of had an exchange of each gets to visit each other's planet, and each left coming back being like, hey, my own society is flawed. Let me fix this in a certain way. And if we had the perspective of Shevek saying, man, Uras is hell, AIO is hell, at least my society has this ideal we're going to keep fighting for, da-da-da. And then if we had the perspective from an AIO person who went over to Uras, and then as traveling back went, hey, Anaris, that Anarch society is hell. My place, man, mine's got a lot of issues, but I'm going to solve it within this framework.
Mhm.
And I think if the plot was designed that way, it would have been so much more compelling to me as a reader to go, okay, showing that each societies have these flaws and coming back in their own prospective citizens, viewing their own society as deeply flawed, yet the ideals worth striving for.
I think the answer to that is us, the reader, is supposed to be that person from Uras, from
Mhm.
AIO?
AIO. Again.
AIO. We're supposed to be that. Those flashbacks back to Anaris,
Mhm.
that is us being on Anaris and experiencing that. And Shevek is so we do kind of have that in the sense of Shevek and the reader relationship.
Yeah. You get Shevek on his own planet, and then we get to see how it is. But again, it's strange because maybe just my reading of it didn't come across it. Yeah, because I was reading those past and those flashback scenes and going, oh, this is kind of dystopian, But again, I don't know if the intent was to fully show everything sucks. So that.
Yes, so
it would have made a lot more sense coming from an alien rather than Shevek's own upbringing, I guess. But no, I didn't dislike the structure. I just think there was I like that idea because then I think it would have been a lot more open to ambiguity and leaving the reader to decide for themselves rather than at the end this being the presentation. But at the same time, there were scenes with Shevek wanting to leave in the past, and you see his mother wanting him not to leave, and that interesting dynamic. There was these micro scenes like that, and the prisoner scene mentioned earlier in his flashbacks that showed you Anaris culture and society, and there were moments of intrigue there for me. There was moments of I didn't have too much notes other than what's the last thing? Oh yeah, the Terran ambassador at the end coming on the journey home, the person from Earth. Did you feel like that was kind of out of nowhere? Did you feel like that was built up? Any thoughts particular on that?
Neutral. I mean,
neutral.
It's
Okay.
fine that it's there.
Okay.
Maybe it's an interesting perspective to tack on at the end of, hey, look, you're seeing these two planets and calling Uras hell. Well, where do you think I came from? If you think that's hell,
Yeah.
damn.
if you think that is,
You should try coming home to my place.
yeah, yeah. So plot wise, we kind of div-labbed around it earlier as well, where we were talking about I guess the major midpoint of this book would be where he starts to realize the problems with Urus society and wants to go visit the revolutionaries on Urus. And we have the battle scene, and we have the scene where he's there and the war, which is, I forget the character's name that is a part of the revolution, but I won't ask you because I also know you don't remember the character's name. But you have that scene and the meta, as the plot's constructed. I didn't have huge issues with that. Again, I'm kind of reiterating the same point. So I guess I'm trying to add more substance, but I'm lacking at the moment. Anything from you?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I don't have too much other than being above average. I don't think it's a poorly constructed plot,
right?
But it was not a particularly interesting plot to me, but it wasn't flawed, really.
Now let's talk about something flawed. Worldbuilding. What'd you give it out of 5 stars?
This is my lowest one.
Yeah, mine too.
2.0.
2 stars. I had to go 1.75 for this one. 1.75 on our scale means very flawed, and obviously I've been talking about the whole time of how frustrating it was and how very flawed it was to me. So we touched on a lot of this in the thought-provoking section.
I think it's good to explain to video if you're new to our stuff. We do have a very specific rating system. You're welcome to check out in the description down below. Our 1 through 5 has very specific words, and ultimately the categories are specific goals. So for world building, 5 out of 5 would be, floored. We were completely immersed into the story, and being a 1 being bad,
no immersion.
No immersion.
That's what it means on their scale.
So judging it by that category, I am at a 2 of I was constantly taken out of the story. I was not really immersed. Okay, but I wouldn't go all the way to 1 because there are some interesting stuff I can bring up of, hey, if you're going to have this anarchist society, this seems like the most logical setup to start off with. So it's clearly like well thought out, but ultimately in its execution in little moments, I kept getting taken out of the story. So that's why I gave it a 2 and you gave it a 1.75.
Yep. Oof. And yeah, very, very flawed to me. And this issue here of, I want to touch on that too, because to say, hey, this isn't realistic. It's a sci-fi book. It's a fantasy book. What do you mean it's not realistic? Using the example I did before of obviously we'd all look at a plane in Middle Earth or whatever it may be and go, that shouldn't exist in your internal consistency of this. So when reading and when immersing in fantasy and sci-fi, why I think the genre is so special is that it can make you completely believe this place is real. So it's why it's the best to me. It's why, and in Le Guin's own essay, Why Do Americans Fear Dragons? She gives one of the best explanations of why fiction and storytelling is of the utmost importance. I agree with Le Guin completely on that point of, she says, I'm not, oh man, I had it at one point in my head about fiction, but she says this, it's such statements as once upon a time there lived a hobbit, once upon a time there lived a dragon, or in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. It's such beautiful non-facts such as these that we peculiar human beings in our own way may discover the truth. Like, these beautiful non-facts is how we discover the truth. Like in fiction, we're reading this kind of stuff, and even though it's not real to us, we want it to be real. And that's what we mean by this world building section of, I'm going, man, I so wanted this to be real, but don't want to reiterate too much, but talking about that core aspect of, if Le Guin wanted to write Anaris in a way that the world building was believable, you could go to the extreme of, I mentioned Discworld earlier, the absurdism of, hey, you just have to know everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. Everybody's on board. There's not dissent. And like the conditioning since childhood actually works. And everybody's on board. And then a lot of the complaints go away of like, okay, I just have to suspend disbelief. The what if is, hey, what if all humans were just on board for this system?
To give a counterexample of a reason why I love Star Trek so much is Star Trek's whole, post they don't have an economy in, say, like at Starfleet. Their whole system of society is very different from ours because they have solved the problem of scarcity. They have replicators of basically they can print anything. Anything is like there is no more. The idea of scarcity is gone. Infinite resources, infinite everything. That changes. And like, hey, the method of that happening, is that even realistic?
Doesn't matter.
Get beyond the point. Okay, that's the thing I'm buying into. And now with that established, how does the rest of this society work? How does the rest of the world work?
Yep.
I'm bought in. And now it feels internally consistent. With the Dispossessed, I kept getting back to, all right, we are in two worlds where, humans are still they're like us. They're supposed to be not really any different.
They're from Urus.
They're from Urus.
Mm-hmm.
And yet these human desires of, competition, of, naturally farming hierarchies, violence, preferring one person or the other, differing worldviews, conflicting ideas of ways of life, all of these things still exist. And yet on one planet, it's exacerbated. It's all the problems of the system, and these things balloon into gigantic conflicts. And to assume that, yeah, on Anaris, it's just one-offs examples, that out of 20 million people, there's not going to be a solid 10,000 that just go, nah, we actually don't drink the Kool-Aid anymore, and we're going to just take over. Out of 20 million, really? I'm looking like these are still supposed to be humans, so that's where like I'm not on a point of, oh, this wouldn't work in our world. Forget that. This wouldn't work in this world. That's where I'm drawing the line.
And the thing is, I would be, again, if this was the what if case, was everybody's on board and it just works that way, okay.
I'm far more of like,
I
accept the concept that human nature
was
can
fixed.
be changed.
Fixed, yes.
Fundamentally.
Okay, so if I was on the page of if the what if question was human nature changed and it worked, okay, that's the what if. I am in this world, that the internal consistency that the Dispossessed created, and now let's run with it. What can we learn? Great. But it's trying to still show the realism of that social Darwinist aspect in human beings, where yeah, that violence, that's preference. Even preference is a hierarchy. Even saying I like Chevek liking physics, that's a hierarchy over not liking biology.
Labor.
I don't know, whatever it might be.
is.
It's just everything exists in that realm. So that is the big issue with it. And it, like you said in Star Trek, for example, of course, no, can an infinite resource thing exist? Is that realistic? No, but it's what do you do if that's the bounds of your reality? If that's the sci-fi universe, then what plays out afterwards?
And it's fun to explore human nature. Human nature fundamentally, roughly staying the same, but now with infinite resources. How does this change?
How does that change us?
How does this change dynamics between people?
Mm-hmm.
Deeply interesting.
Right.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely works of sci-fi. Next Generation is peak television, by the way.
I gotta watch it so bad.
You gotta.
show me clips and they're all great.
They're all amazing. It is the wonderful balance of deep, philosophical, interesting ideas and also very silly episodes where we have robots pretending to be Sherlock Holmes.
That sounds wonderful and lovely.
It's great. I love the balance. Back when television was actually TV. And you could have we're going to have the fun holodeck episode. This is the variety of like, God, I wish we could have when TV was TV and not just really long goddamn movies. Pisses me. I hate
I'm a little excited.
I hate the 8-episode TV structure. It pisses me off.
However, Stranger Things season 5 being very long movies, I'm kind of down for it. I'm kind of down for it. They've done a great job.
Exceptions don't disprove the rule.
That is an exception. So, yeah, you see even on Anaris, another example of this is the women are generally more propertarian than men are intrinsically, because through childbirth and having a kid for 9 months, they have this more spirit to feel propertarian and owning their kid in that way. So again, all of this is presented as this human condition does still exist. So it goes back to that one fundamental principle of does the microcosm, does the violence and the person that isn't totally on board and does still have ego and propertarianism, the conditioning clearly does not work, right? So that microcosm can't cause ultimate violence and war because there's no state to do so. There's not a police force that they can't do something. That's in theory what it's getting at. Of look, the anarchical society works because what are they going to do? Them and what army? But then my question is, well, that one person is committing violence. Who's going to stop them? Them and what army? What enforcement mechanism? And again, it's the social ostracization. It's the mob mentality. But then you just get a little disagreement of, hey, I think this guy's right. I think this girl's right.
And then you just have a handful of like some people agreeing and staying together. You would need a sufficient way of taking these individual dissidents and then isolating them before they can actually come together. And that would require some type of state apparatus. So, yeah, that's...
I generally was really interested in how the society functioned too, starting off of you have the Div Lab and the labor. We didn't really get into this point very much at all, that the labor comes in in rotations where you take on manual labor and you do that for a certain period of time and you rotate into another job. And if you feel like, hey, I don't want to do that, the society, the social organism ostracizes you and doesn't give you rations, or, hey, you can go, it's an anarchy, go do your thing, but you're not going to do the thing in this social organism. So and you have the PDC, who is essentially became a bureaucracy, and it's this sort of hierarchy where, how many times have we said that word now? But you have the PDC, which functions as this bureaucracy, which Chevek doesn't believe at first. And then you have an important aspect of the world building is the sexual relationships. We didn't talk about that. We talked about that one scene on Urus, but how do families and how do relationships function on Anaris? How did you see that as world building? Did you think it was accurate, not accurate? What did you think about it? Were you able to be immersed in that dynamic? The family dynamics, how kids would essentially be born, and then the ownership over the child.
It was the most dystopian aspect to me in the entire book of the that the society's valuing the parent's freedom over the responsibility to the child, and Chevek's mom kind of being in many ways surprised that Chevek has any type of negative feelings toward her, going like, well, I was just valuing my work over you, but I'm now ready for some type of relationship. And him going, no, you were never my mother. You were never, like, why should I have a connection with you? And her going, but I want it now. And so, yeah, that whole relationship, and then just the dynamics of, basically the free spirit of, sexual freedom being just all you need. And Chevek eventually does realize, I would say, the more truthful lesson of, yeah, that's fun, but ultimately not very fulfilling. And that you trade novelty for loyalty and ultimate fulfillment.
Ooh, so good line. Good line.
There you go.
Nice.
But yeah, that's, I guess, the lesson that Chevek learns through his life, which I guess that's something. But
yeah, not
as
just
far as Anaris and anarchism treats the relationship between people, yeah, there's a cost to these kind of one-off voluntary relationships that you never actually have a significant partner in valuing one person over another.
And they're all consensual relationships, right? It's just voluntary.
Which
so another world building.
Consent is not a universal value among all cultures. And so that needs to be enforced. That is not just inherent knowledge to people. It's its own thing.
And an aspect to that too is, they have these relationships, and Chevek looks at, there's the one, Chevek isn't homosexual, but has sex with the other person who is homosexual, and just does that because he's like, hey, it pleases him, right? So and these sort of relationships forming, it's still voluntary, right? You still say yes to it and are empathetic, and you want to give other person pleasure, right? So I'm trying to understand, make sure I'm not reading this wrong. The relationships were, as presented, consensual and voluntary, but also doesn't Chevette go up to that one person and she says she was in a relationship at one point? I'm trying to remember the precise scene, but doesn't somebody deny Chevette at one point? Or he goes off into the mines. Do you remember that
Yeah.
portion of the book?
Yeah, fairly early on, she had a partner.
She had a partner, right?
And he had this frustration, but that was about it.
Right.
And it's like, that kind of frustration happens in every young man's life, which, true.
And they would all have sex while they were children too, so they kind of got them out of their system too. So that was another part of the society that was present.
Gross.
Yeah, well, look, Wynn's not saying that's good. No,
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It's just again, why it's so dystopian, right?
To that answer,
how do you put that in? It's so dystopian.
Chapter 1, Brave New World.
Mm.
One of the best written chapters of any literary work. That is, God, nothing has just affected me more emotionally than that chapter.
We should read and review that.
Yeah,
you reread it. I have not read it yet. I would love
that
to.
novel.
I would love to read it.
It is by far, I think, the best dystopian novel ever written. Way better than 1984. Way better than Clockwork Orange. Or
No. Eye of the World is the worst dystopian. Rand.
One of these days, I'm
don't
waiting.
bore me.
I'm waiting for years down the line. You're gonna
I'll read it to my kids, and then
you're gonna go down like all of these novel things, and you're just gonna want to come back home to a classic fantasy and go, you're gonna find an appreciation for
the
it eventually.
simultaneity theory. I'm gonna come full circle.
You're gonna find like, man, all of these. I'm just keep seeking out this new novel thing. I want to be wowed, surprised, and then you're gonna come back home to classic fantasy and go, you know what? I appreciate just the wonderful journey of the farm boy.
There is great classic fantasy. It's not that beautiful.
I don't know.
Well,
you told me that you still think the movies from Lord of the Rings is better than the books.
That's a fact.
Which is sacrilege.
That's a fact.
Incorrect.
They're both masterpieces, and one has a higher hierarchy.
No,
it's on the totem pole.
You are right. They are both masterpieces, but the books are by far better.
No.
Yeah,
no.
Way better.
Funny. Now, how are we going to settle this dispute?
That is true. We both have different worldviews.
We have a disagreement
on
both
worldviews cannot exist at the same time.
In fact, no. We must end all people who think like you.
Yes.
Okay. On the relationships aspect, so part of that person having a partner as well. I'm trying to think how would relationships work in this anarchical state of would it be the case that you're obligated to have sex for the social organism if somebody else wants it in that case too?
I guess that is part of it.
The extent that it's talking about?
I mean, it's the extent that there's, I think Chevette in this novel does realize that just because there's not a law doesn't mean there isn't influence, doesn't mean there's outside pressures, and that there's different ways to pressure and influence an individual. And so for him in his relationship with his friend, even though he is not homosexual, he is willing to engage in that for the sake of his friend and because of the social pressure for his friendship. And so even though it's not something he prefers and doesn't really want to do, that is a pressure on him.
And we learn about this. There was not just a PDC of an hierarchy, but we learned about the tyranny of the majority.
Mm-hmm.
You're still looking at social pressure that still exists. How do you get rid? It's not gone, right?
Yeah.
So yes, as far as the world building went, what do I have here? So Anars versus Eros. We talked about that. Yeah. I guess is there anything we haven't covered so far about the world?
We talked a lot about that in thought provokingness as well and themes. So beyond that, what other aspects to the story do you think just didn't click with you?
As far as the world building went?
Yeah, so we're talking a lot about Anaris. Is there anything about Urus that didn't jive with you about the world building?
I guess this is the way I read the book too. Is again, I am so down for these thoughtful books of kind of the point of the book being I want to teach you something, right? Or not just want to teach
not
you something.
teach
I
you
want to make
something.
you
I wanna-
think.
I wanna
want
make
to
you think.
challenge your opinions. All these kind of
I
things.
want you
right?
to see the world from a different point of view.
Exactly.
Which
And,
is it is the nature and the goal of this book is
Yes.
to show in a way our world from a different point of view.
Exactly. I guess when I was looking at our world, so at the time she's writing this as well, I understand the context and all that. But when looking at AIO and sorry, when looking at AIO and this being representation of the U.S. and how we see war, we see the assault, we see all these things, I was more taken aback by. This isn't exactly being said, but we talked about that assault scene and being, hey, because you're taking on the idea of proprietarians and and the fact that you have these kind of that you can own something, that it could lead to something that his mindset with relationships changed so that he was able to, he was
Own
able
someone
to,
else.
yeah,
Yes.
he was able to own somebody else, and that because it's a critique against the structure of capitalism. There's some movies like Parasite I've mentioned to you before, which
Mhm.
Parasite it's a great movie. What a hot take. I think it's number one on so many places. It's not my favorite movie. It's not like top tier. I think it's almost overrated just because everybody says it's their favorite ever. That's
Gotcha.
I'm like, okay, let's slow down. It's really well done. It's great. But and you can see throughout literature of critiques of capitalism and so forth. It's just because this novel and the world building we're talking about is that escapism. Obviously, you're reading that and you can't escape from the direct metaphor that's being made of, okay, I get it. This is our society. Okay, that's our society. This is the Soviet Union over here. This is your anarchical state. And I'm not like groveling or looking at this representation and thinking, I don't know how to put it other than I understand her perspective of this. I see as she's putting this hierarchy and showing how bad this is.
The issues of
wealth
consumer-
inequality,
wealth inequality,
yeah.
consumerism
Yeah.
of like people trying to chase happiness
Okay,
through purchasing things.
Here's a scene,
yeah.
the art piece scene.
Yes.
And we go into he goes to see this art piece and oh my god, we don't make that back on Anaris. What the heck? That's a great piece of art. And you find out people can specialize in that. He looks at it and it costs what, 4,000, lots of money. He goes, oh, okay, it's still there's still a profit motive to it. They have these things, they have these luxuries. At least the wealthy have these luxuries. And you look at how they specialize and have all these sorts of things. I just think the aspect that's missing from the world building in there isn't that the critiques, not that the critiques aren't valid of like, yeah, I get it. I've heard capitalist critiques. I get it. I live in reality. I understand.
I live in
it's
this
not
world
new.
too.
I get
see
it.
the problems.
I understand. It's more so the lessons learned of, there's that family dynamic, which is interesting to look at, of seeing the good family. But that's why I would have preferred having a person from each planet going to the other, because kind of viewing your own society, like it's that such negative attitude, I guess that revolutionary attitude, which I'm going, yeah, imperfect, but the answer isn't what you're saying. It's like, okay, critiques, but then what do you replace it with?
I'm on board with all your critiques. Got it. All right, we see it. What's the solution? Everything you just said sounds like it'd be worse. I am unconvinced. And so until someone else offers me a better solution, I'm going to stick with the not famine
Well,
one.
also the ideal tier too of I get that profit motive, all this stuff can be used and greed exists, but I think the natural thing of like owning something, like you do something, that being yours, that child, the fact of ownership is a value to me. So
Ownership is a prerequisite of responsibility.
Yeah.
And now, Anaris is saying like, well, no, you can have a collective ownership of everyone has a buy-in, and so you can have responsibility because everyone owns it. And that's well, just in an experience in life, I'm like, no, we have the tragedy.
Well,
of
what
the
about in this
commons,
book
really.
and how the book presents it, not just in life,
Not just how the book
is it,
presents it.
no, but I mean, staying consistent to the story.
Staying consistent to the story. It's, I guess maybe it does show some degree of when people take things, they treat them with respect because there's not many things, so they don't abuse it and they leave it away. So,
But we do see the hoarder, right?
we see individuals, but it's the assumption that yes, human nature is going to pop up here and there, and like as individual.
Again, violence precedes the
exceptions
state. Violence
rather than-
precedes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, ownership does come with it the idea of responsibility, and that you cannot be responsible for something you do not have a stake in. And so there's those two kind of things go hand in hand.
Now, can ownership get out of hand if you feel like you own this person and this is this person? Of course, but to take away ownership and is a flaw.
Or just
what are you
the
replacing
idea that profit itself, not that profit can't doesn't have flaws in the sense of, oh, does profit come over human life?
Does it corrupt?
Or does it corrupt others? Is the profit incentive because of other factors will lead you astray? All those things are very valid criticisms, but getting to profit itself is immoral and wrong. No. Because now we're talking not about the practicality of it, but the principle of it, the ideal, because that's the criticism here.
Because is it a case of profit a zero-sum game? That's the question. Is it if somebody gains, does somebody lose? If I hand you money and you give me this thing, does it mean that one person gained, the other lost? It has to equal. If one person got +2, the other person got -2. Because in that exchange, in the me giving you something, you giving me something, is there any way that we could both benefit from that?
Yeah. I mean, and yes, that's definitely true. We see that in just regular example, the reason why wealth in the pie actually gets bigger rather than just more. Wealth has increased rather than just pooled around certain areas. It's not exclusive. But beyond that,
I'd ask a question, but I don't want to get too much into economics because
profit itself as an ideal is a decentralized way of determining value between individuals. That's the purpose of it. It's the idea that instead of a state, instead of one person just declaring, this is this valuable, and everyone else going, no, it ain't. We don't want that thing. That's what price is for. That's the purpose, is so that it's decentralized. It is, just because you make something doesn't mean it's other people value it. That's a good thing. That's a good thing to have. It's a good way to determine, hey, where do resources flow to things that people value more. That's a decent concept, a decent ideal that I like. That is explaining that ideal. I think that is a good ideal to strive for. That has complications and
flaws and corruption,
corruption, all these things. But as an ideal, I am convinced.
And that's why it's kind of flipped, because the book is going, the ideal is no hierarchy, anarchy, this, but let's strive toward it. And the opposite is, hey, I get it. There's a bunch of problems here, but owning things, having responsibility over something, profit in the good, capital P, not lowercase b, bad, but that kind of stuff.
Valuing individuals because of their efficiency or their excellence. Yeah, those are good things.
Yeah. And it shows the society in the beginning of the book. Look at how many resources they have. Look at all of this. Wow. Look at this plenty. But it's clearly shown in that bad light of look at the cost. Look at the zero-sum game. Look at all the rich. Look at all the awful and all the decrepitness, which, again, there's bad stuff in the world. And sorry to keep bringing up the world, because the book it's just making metaphors and talking about the world. But yes, that's also the thing with it, too, of going, I don't know if the answer is just, as it's presented in the book as well, it's not a convincing answer to go constant revolution and constant change against it. I would more so ask the question, changing what? What are you replacing it with? What is the option there? And yes, there are things to fix. I guess in my spirit, there are correct things. There's a bunch of books. Hey, Red Rising, I'm going like, let's go. Revolt against these guys. Let's go. There's plenty of those books that, of course, revolutions exist, and that happens in dystopians. Again, that's the answer too. Is they're dystopians, and it's our agreement or disagreement about what this ideal society is. Okay, we're. Are we over talking it? Have we said this already many times? Yeah.
I do want to answer. Frequently when we're talking about this book, people in our Discord have sent up the clip of Ursula K. Le Guin giving a speech talking to individuals about as an answer to the frequented question of
Yeah.
if anarchism is, if you see anarchism as,
Well, she doesn't say
so-
that.
or-
Yeah. Yeah.
if you see capitalism as inevitable and just this impossible beast to take down, and that it is inevitable and just a permanent fixture of our society, and her answer was like, well, we thought the same way of the divine right of kings. Applause, ha ha ha, actually capitalism can be taken down. I'm sitting here going, yeah? Like, who's out here saying capitalism's inevitable? Who's out here going like, yeah, it's always existed, it'll always will exist? It's like, no, it's a relatively new political system that did replace something else, and clearly from history and world events can be replaced and taken down like that. It does not.
I mean, in many countries it has.
It can take less, like in 1 year you can remove it. Like, that system can go away at any point. Like, that's, I don't know. I was reading that going, is that supposed to be
When
like
you're watching that video.
Yeah. Is that supposed to be like a revelation point? Like, of course it is fragile. It can go away at any moment. It's not a permanent fixture. Anyway.
Well,
I just
that's
wanted to
part of it,
respond to
too,
that video of
is-
like the clapback of, capitalism is inevitable. Of course it isn't. It is not inevitable. It is a system we put in place and can go away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a system that also works with, I guess you could say, works with human nature in that way too. Of, you go back to Adam Smith's Invisible Hand and all the theories around, hey, look, if this person, if they're motivated by the self, being selfish about something in general, like, yes, you want this, but the invisible hand, you will also help somebody else because you want to, in order to profit, in order to get something, you have to provide something that is worthy enough to be bought or traded or bartered with, whatever it might be. If you were to be worthy in the marketplace, what do you provide to the community? So the selfishness kind of works into the system itself. So working again, but well, it's why it exists in the real world and anarchy doesn't. So we're not talking about just plainly what does exist of anarchy. I don't want to keep. I see the word so often, but yeah, it's. I'm beating the point to death. But yes, that is that clip though, not being in the book. Maybe you gave it a little lower because of that clip you saw. Was it affected?
No, it was just,
No.
I saw that. I was like, oh, if you think capitalism is inevitable, I'm like,
I don't.
no,
Yeah.
I don't. Of course it isn't. What point is that? Any political system is not inevitable. It is a system created by humans, and it was created and it can go away. Every single one of them. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's an obvious point, but whatever.
And these are a way of. Let's go to Prose, and then we'll finish up with that stuff at the end. All right, you want to give your Prose rating out of 5 stars?
Yep.
What'd you give it?
4.5.
Spectacular.
Spectacular prose.
Yeah.
It's a well-written book.
Mm-hmm.
Not an ounce of real fluff in there. Really well thought out lines, like definitely quotable. I could definitely see if you're more in line with the philosophy behind this book, you're going to be quoting this book.
There's
She's
lots
a
of quotes to
wordsmith.
take away.
She's a
Lots of
damn
quotes.
good wordsmith.
She really is. Yes. I give it a 4.25. Really great. I could be convinced to go up too. I was just thinking, it's really great prose. I have want me to say some lines here?
Go ahead.
Okay. If you have any prep too. So this is about suffering. And hey, I'm on, look at that, suffering. Okay. If you evade suffering, you also evade the chance of joy. Pleasure you may get, or pleasures, but you will not be fulfilled. You will not know what it is to come home. Ooh, cool line. And here's another one. It is our suffering that brings us together. It is not love. Love does not obey the mind and turns to hate when forced. The bond that binds us is beyond choice. We are brothers. We are brothers in what we share, in pain, which each of us must suffer alone, in anger and poverty and hope. We know our brotherhood. We know it because we have had to learn it. We know that there is no help for us but from one another, that no hand will save us if we do not reach out our hand. And the hand that you reach out is empty, as is mine. You have nothing. You possess nothing. You own nothing. You are free. All you have is what you are and what you give. Again, very well written. And again, going back to the thematic elements of the story, but how how profound is it to speak that way? I see why it resonates with a lot of people. Of she knows what she's doing. She is talented.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, and that anything else that you had for Prose or open random page? You gonna do your random page?
I like
roulette?
the old random page test.
There we go.
Here, tell me when.
Stop.
Tell me when.
Stop.
I'll
Is
start
this
at
gonna be
that
like
sentence.
last time?
I'm just gonna start at the paragraph instead of like the random sentence.
Yep.
For over 20 years, the 12 ships granted the Adonian settlers by the Council of World Governments went back and forth between the worlds until the million souls who chose the new life had all been brought across the dry abyss. Then the port was closed to immigration and left open only to the freight ships of the trade agreement. By then, Anaris town held 100,000 people and had been renamed Abernay, which meant, in the new language of the new new society, mind. The well-written paragraph. Love that. It's great.
Nice.
You can pull up a random page and it's all incredibly well written.
Awesome job. You're reading too. What a great job, Rich.
I flubbed the last line.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Freaking loser.
I know.
Wow.
Did you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. We've said like 5 things 10 times.
Sure.
I think that's what we've said a lot here. Final thoughts. No, I don't think so. I'm probably going to think of it as soon as we're done recording. Go, damn, I wish I said that. I wish that was brought up and clarified. But I will say, everybody in the comments, be civil to each other. You can be mean to us. It's totally okay. But be civil to the comments, because this was picked for our book club. It's obviously a more political heavy one. So just be civil to each other. To us, make more fun of Rich than me. That would make me a little bit happier. But I can't stop you from.
Yeah.
Well, you're you're completely free in spirit to do so, unless the state stops you. Will the state of YouTube stop you?
The YouTube could stop you.
We could go delete, but we won't. We don't do that.
I think I've only done that once in the history of our channel.
It was someone's like spamming the N-word or something, right?
Yeah.
Which was awful. Yeah.
Like I saw that and like it went to the filter one and it's like, do you want to delete this? And I went, yeah, that one I'm just gonna delete that one. But I frequently will go into like the on review comments every once in a while. I was just like accept. I just accept all of them. And that was the one I went.
And all the ones I look to
leave that one to delete.
I do the same. They're pretty mean sometimes. It's like, yeah, do.
Who cares?
Yeah.
They can say what they want.
They're free unless the hierarchy.
It's mainly because I value your words over theirs. I don't like if someone says something mean to me. It's like, all right, fine. It's not gonna get under my skin.
Hey, we value Jared being here in his words as well. So I want to say
much so.
he was here. Wow, it felt like a long time ago. It kind of was, wasn't it?
Kind of was.
But that was the first time we did a review, like a partial with somebody, and then finished it up with ourselves. So that was new. Let us know what you all thought down below. Thank you, Jared, for coming on. And we will have some sort of book review, some sort of topic next episode. Any parting words, Rich?
Democracy is cringe, but
Anarchy is cringier.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.